The moment Lucas Hartley wrote his name on every line of Mei Lin's dance card, he declared war on an entire town. She was nobody, a Chinese seamstress they pretended not to see. He was everything, the rancher who owned half the territory. One dance should have been scandalous enough, but he claimed them all, leading her onto that floor while Redemption Creek watched in frozen horror. They thought it was madness, a mistake he'd regret. They had no idea it was just the beginning. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Mei Lin's journey travels. The needle slipped, pricking Mei Lin's finger for the third time that evening. She didn't flinch, just pressed her thumb against the wound until the bleeding stopped, then wiped the blood on the underside of the fabric where no one would ever see it. Mrs. Pemberton's wedding dress couldn't have stains, not even invisible ones. Everything had to be perfect for women like her. Women who belonged. Mei Lin held the silk up to the lamplight, examining her stitches. Flawless, as always. Her mother had taught her that much before the fever took her, before the world became a place where Mei Lin had to make herself small, just to survive. Invisible hands create visible beauty, her mother used to say. Mei Lin hadn't understood then. She did now. Outside her window, Redemption Creek was preparing for the harvest ball. She could hear the excitement bleeding through the walls, women laughing as they tried on gowns, men arguing about which horses to bring, children shrieking as they practiced their dance steps in the street. The whole town was caught up in it, this one night where everyone pretended they were something more than what they were. Everyone except Mei Lin. She should have been used to it by now. 6 years in this town, and she still didn't belong. Oh, they needed her skill with a needle, needed her to fix their mistakes, needed her to work twice as hard for half the pay. But need wasn't the same as acceptance. She'd learned that the hard way. The knock on her door came just as she was finishing the hem. She already knew who it was. It's open, Sarah. Sarah Chen pushed through the door, carrying a dress bag, and wearing an expression Mei Lin had seen too many times. Hope mixed with determination, like she could somehow force the world to be different just by wanting it badly enough. Don't start, Sarah said before Mei Lin could speak. You're coming tonight. I'm working. You're always working. Sarah laid the bag across Mei Lin's cutting table. And before you say you have nothing to wear, I brought you something. Mei Lin didn't look up from her stitching. Sarah, I know what you're going to say, that it's not worth it, that they'll just ignore you anyway, that you'd rather stay here where it's safe. Sarah's voice softened. But May, you can't hide forever. I'm not hiding, I'm surviving. There's a difference? Mei Lin set down Mrs. Pemberton's dress and finally looked at her friend. Sarah was 3 years younger, born in San Francisco, to parents who'd managed to build something that looked like success. She'd come to Redemption Creek with her merchant husband, full of ideas about how things could be different here, how the West was supposed to be a place where anyone could start over. She still believed that somehow. Yes, Mei Lin said quietly. There's a difference. Sarah pulled the dress from the bag, deep blue silk that caught the light like water. My cousin sent this from Sacramento. It's never been worn, and before you say no, just try it on, please? Mei Lin wanted to refuse, wanted to explain that a beautiful dress wouldn't change anything, that she'd been to these dances before and knew exactly how the night would go. She'd stand against the wall while other women's dance cards filled up. She'd watch couples spin across the floor and pretend she didn't care. She'd leave early, before the pity in Sarah's eyes became too much to bear. But Sarah was looking at her with such desperate hope that Mei Lin found herself reaching for the dress anyway. It fit perfectly. See, Sarah beamed, it's fate. Mei Lin studied herself in the small mirror above her wash basin. The woman looking back at her seemed like a stranger, elegant, almost beautiful. For just a moment, she let herself imagine walking into that ballroom and belonging there. Really belonging, not just being tolerated at the edges. Then she caught sight of her dance card hanging from her wrist, every line blank, and the fantasy crumbled. Come on, Sarah said, linking their arms together. We're already late. The Redemption Creek Harvest Ball was held in the town's largest building, a converted barn that Judge Morrison had bought and renovated with money from his silver mine. Someone had strung paper lanterns from the rafters, and a band was already playing something cheerful and loud. The dance floor was packed with couples, the air thick with perfume and sweat, and the particular electricity that comes from everyone trying very hard to have a good time. Maylin felt the stares the moment she walked in. She'd expected it, still hated it. Mrs. Pemberton's eyes went wide when she spotted the blue dress, then narrow when she realized who was wearing it. Margaret Fletcher whispered something to her sister, both of them hiding laughs behind gloved hands. Even Pastor Williams looked uncomfortable, though he nodded politely before turning back to his conversation. "Ignore them," Sarah muttered, steering Maylin toward the refreshment table. "They're just jealous because you look better than they do." That wasn't true, and they both knew it. But Maylin appreciated the lie anyway. She was pouring herself a cup of punch when she heard the voice behind her. "Well, well, decided to grace us with your presence after all, Miss Chen?" Thomas Reed, of course. Maylin turned slowly, keeping her expression neutral. Reed owned the general store and half the commercial property in town. He also owned most of the town council's votes, which made him dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with his money. "Mr. Reed?" She didn't bother with a smile. "That's quite a dress." His eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Trying to catch yourself a husband? Trying to enjoy an evening." He sipped his whiskey, watching her over the rim of his glass. "You know, I was just speaking with Albert Monroe. His wife passed last spring. Terrible tragedy. He's been looking for someone to help with his children. Someone practical." Maylin's fingers tightened around her cup. Albert Monroe was 53 years old with 5 children and a reputation for working his help until they broke. Everyone knew his first wife had died exhausted. "How kind of you to think of me," she said evenly, "but I'm quite happy with my current situation." "Are you?" Reed smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. "Because I heard different. Heard that Mrs. Pemberton is moving to Denver after the wedding, and the Miller sisters are having their mother send dresses from Chicago now. Seems like your services might not be needed much longer." The words hit exactly where he'd aimed them. Maylin had heard the same rumors, had spent sleepless nights calculating how long her savings would last if the work dried up, but she'd be damned if she'd let Reed see her worry. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Reed, truly, but I can manage my own affairs." "Can you?" He leaned closer, and she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Because it seems to me like you're running out of options. A woman alone in your situation needs to be practical. Monroe's not a bad man. He'd provide for you, give you a place in this community. That's more than—" "The lady said she can manage her own affairs." The voice came from behind Reed, deep and quiet, and carrying enough authority that Reed actually took a step back. Maylin looked up and up into the face of Lucas Hartley. She'd seen him before, of course. Everyone in Redemption Creek knew who Lucas Hartley was. He owned the largest ranch in 3 territories, ran cattle operations that stretched across thousands of acres, and had enough money and influence that even men like Reed watched what they said around him. He came to town maybe once a month, conducted his business, and left. He didn't socialize, didn't attend dances or church socials, or any of the events where the town society tried to impress each other, until tonight. He was taller than she'd realized, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that seemed to see more than they should. There was a hardness to him, in the set of his jaw, the width of his shoulders, the way he stood like he was ready for trouble. But his voice when he spoke to her was surprisingly gentle. "Mr. Hartley." Reed recovered quickly, though his smile had gone tight. "Didn't expect to see you here." Clearly. Lucas didn't look at Reed. He was watching Maylin with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Ma'am, would you do me the honor of a dance?" The entire ballroom seemed to stop breathing. Maylin stared at him, certain she'd misheard. Men like Lucas Hartley didn't ask women like her to dance. They didn't acknowledge her existence beyond a polite nod if they happened to pass on the street. They certainly didn't interrupt Thomas Reed's attempts at matchmaking and offer their hand in front of half the town. Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. "I don't think, unless you'd rather not," Lucas said. His tone was casual, but something in his eyes made her think the question mattered more than he was letting on. "I'd understand if you prefer to avoid the scandal." There it was. He knew exactly what he was asking, knew that one dance with him would mark her as surely as a brand, would give every gossip in town ammunition for months. He was offering her a choice, safety or risk, invisibility or exposure. Maylin had been invisible for 6 years. "I'd be honored," she heard herself say. Lucas's smile was small, barely there, but it changed his entire face. He offered his arm and she took it, aware of every eye following them as he led her onto the dance floor. Behind them, Reed was saying something sharp and angry, but Lucas didn't seem to notice or care. The music had changed to something slower, more intimate. Lucas positioned them in the center of the floor, not hiding at the edges where they might have gone unnoticed, but right in the middle where everyone could see. "I should warn you," Mei Lin said as he took her hand. "I'm not very good at this." "Neither am I." He placed his other hand at her waist, light but steady. "We'll figure it out together." They started to move. Mei Lin stepped on his foot twice in the first minute, but Lucas just adjusted his rhythm to match hers, patient and unhurried. Around them, other couples had stopped dancing to stare. The whispers started almost immediately. She could feel them like insects crawling across her skin. "They're all watching," she said quietly. "Let them." "Mr. Hartley." "Lucas." He guided her through a turn that should have been graceful but ended up slightly off balance. Neither of them seemed to mind. "If we're going to scandalize the entire town, we might as well be on a first-name basis." Despite everything, Mei Lin felt herself smile. "That seems like asking for trouble. I've never been very good at avoiding trouble." The music shifted and he pulled her slightly closer, breaking every rule of proper dance etiquette, although I'm usually better at starting it on purpose. "This wasn't planned?" "Not exactly." Something complicated crossed his face. "I came tonight because my foreman insisted I needed to show my face and be part of the community. I was planning to make an appearance, shake a few hands, and leave. Then I saw Thomas Reed cornering you and—" He trailed off. "And you decided to rescue me?" "No." His voice was firm. "You didn't need rescuing. You were handling him fine. I just thought maybe you deserved to enjoy one dance without someone trying to marry you off to Albert Monroe." The song ended. Lucas stepped back but didn't release her hand. Around them, the crowd was still staring, waiting to see what would happen next. The band started up again. Another waltz, slightly faster than the last. Lucas looked down at their joined hands, then at her dance card hanging from her wrist. Still blank, all those empty lines a reminder of every dance she'd spent against the wall. "How many more dances does this thing have?" he asked. "6, I think. Maybe 7. Mei Lin's heart was doing something complicated in her chest. "Why?" Lucas plucked the pencil from her card and wrote his name on the second line. Then the third, then the fourth. Mei Lin watched, frozen, as he filled in every single remaining space with the same 2 words. Lucas Hartley. When he finished, he handed the card back to her and met her eyes. "I figure if we're going to give them something to talk about," he said, "we might as well do it right." By the time the third dance ended, Mei Lin had stopped caring about the stares. Lucas wasn't a smooth dancer. He moved like someone more comfortable on horseback than a ballroom floor, and he kept apologizing when he stepped on her hem. But he was genuine in a way that made her chest ache. He didn't make conversation to fill the silence, didn't ask intrusive questions about her past or where she came from, just danced with her like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like every whisper and scandalized gasp happening around them didn't matter at all. Between the 4th and 5th dances, he excused himself to get them both some water. Mei Lin watched him navigate through the crowd, watched the way people parted for him without being asked, the way men offered respectful nods while women looked at him like he was something rare and valuable. Sarah appeared at her elbow the moment he was out of earshot. "What is happening?" Sarah's eyes were wide. "May, Lucas Hartley just filled your entire dance card. Do you know what people are saying?" "I can imagine." "They're saying he's lost his mind. They're saying you must have—" Sarah caught herself. "Well, they're saying terrible things. But also—" She grabbed Mei Lin's hands. "Also, they're saying he's never looked at anyone the way he's looking at you. Not since his wife died." Mei Lin's stomach dropped. "His wife? You didn't know?" Sarah lowered her voice. "It was 5 years ago, Catherine Hartley. She was from Boston. Beautiful, educated, everything the town matrons thought a rancher's wife should be. They'd only been married 2 years when she got sick. Lucas didn't leave her side for 3 weeks, but—" Sarah shook her head. "After she died, he just shut down. Stopped coming to town except when necessary. Everyone thought he'd never look at another woman." "Sarah!" Mei Lin pulled her hands back. "This is just a few dances. Don't make it into something it's not. A few dances? Sarah gestured at Mei Lin's dance card. May, he claimed every dance. That's not nothing. That's Lucas Hartley being kind to someone Thomas Reed was harassing. Nothing more. But even as she said it, Mei Lin wasn't sure she believed it, because the way Lucas had looked at her when he wrote his name on that card, that hadn't felt like kindness. It had felt like a choice, a deliberate, dangerous choice that neither of them fully understood yet. Lucas returned with 2 glasses of water and a slightly uncomfortable expression. We're causing quite a scene, he said, handing her a glass. We could stop, Mei Lin offered, even though something in her chest twisted at the thought. If you'd prefer, I don't prefer. He drank half his water in one swallow. But I want you to understand what you're signing up for here. After tonight, people are going to talk. They're going to make assumptions. Some of those assumptions are going to be ugly, and some people are going to take those assumptions as permission to make your life difficult. He paused. More difficult than it already is. Mei Lin looked around the ballroom. Mrs. Pemberton was whispering furiously to Judge Morrison's wife. Margaret Fletcher looked like she'd swallowed something sour. Even Pastor Williams seemed troubled, his forehead creased with concern as he watched them. Only Thomas Reed looked truly angry. He was standing near the refreshment table with 2 other council members, all 3 of them staring at Lucas and Mei Lin with expressions that promised trouble. They already make my life difficult, Mei Lin said quietly. At least this way I get to dance. Something shifted in Lucas's expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Fair enough. He set down his water glass and offered his hand. Then let's give them something worth talking about. The 5th dance was different from the others. Slower, more intimate, with Lucas holding her closer than propriety allowed. Around them, several couples had left the floor, unwilling to share space with such a scandalous pair. But others remained. Sarah and her husband, a few younger couples who seemed more amused than offended, even old Mr. Chen, who ran the laundry and was grinning like he'd just won a bet. Can I ask you something? Lucas said as they turned across the floor. You can ask. I might not answer. Why did you say yes to that first dance? You had to know what people would think. Mei Lin considered the question. The honest answer was complicated. Tangled up with years of being invisible, with Thomas Reed's threats and her dwindling work prospects, with the desperate hunger to be seen as something more than just useful. But there was a simpler truth underneath all of that. Because you asked, she said finally. Really asked. Like my answer mattered. Like I had a choice. Most people don't bother with that part. Lucas was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. You always have a choice. Maybe not a good one, but it's still yours. Is that what you tell yourself? Every day. He met her eyes. Doesn't make it true, but it helps. The music swelled toward its conclusion. Lucas spun her one last time, and for just a moment, Mei Lin let herself forget everything else. The stares, the whispers, the storm that was surely coming. For one perfect moment, she was just a woman in a blue dress dancing with a man who saw her as more than invisible. Then the song ended, and Thomas Reed was walking toward them with the entire town council behind him. Mr. Hartley, Reed's voice carried across the suddenly quiet ballroom. Might I have a word? Lucas's hand tightened briefly on Mei Lin's waist before he released her. Of course. His tone was pleasant, but Mei Lin could feel the tension radiating off him. Though I'm in the middle of fulfilling my obligations to Miss Chen. Yes, about that. Reed glanced at the other council members, Judge Morrison, Pastor Williams, and Henry Blackwell, who owned the bank. All 4 men wore expressions of grave concern, like they were about to deliver very serious news. The council would like to speak with you, privately. Anything you need to say to me, you can say in front of Miss Chen. This isn't appropriate for... Then I guess we don't have anything to discuss. Lucas turned back to Mei Lin, offering his hand for the next dance. Judge Morrison cleared his throat. Lucas, please. This is a delicate matter. It concerns the reputation of this town, and we'd prefer not to make a public spectacle of it. Bit late for that, someone muttered from the crowd. A few people laughed nervously. Lucas's jaw tightened. For a long moment, Mei Lin thought he was going to refuse again. Then he looked at her, something apologetic in his eyes, and she understood what he was asking. Go, she said quietly. I'll wait. May, I'm not going anywhere. She managed a small smile. I still have 2 more dances to collect on. Reed made a dismissive sound. Miss Chen, this doesn't concern you. Perhaps you should remember that Miss Chen is a guest at this dance, same as everyone else. Sarah had appeared at Mei Lin's side, her husband James right behind her. If the council wants to have private conversations, maybe they should do it somewhere that isn't the middle of a social event. Mrs. Chen is right, James said calmly. He was a quiet man usually, but he had presence when he chose to use it. You're making a scene, gentlemen. Whatever this is about can surely wait until tomorrow. The council members exchanged glances. Pastor Williams looked particularly uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. It can't wait, Reed said flatly. Not if Lucas is planning to continue his association with Miss Chen. The word association landed like a slap. Around them, the whispers intensified. Lucas went very still. Careful, Reed. Someone needs to say it. Reed's voice rose, playing to the crowd now. This behavior is inappropriate. Miss Chen is a vulnerable woman in a difficult position, and you're taking advantage of. I'm standing right here, Mei Lin said. Everyone turned to look at her. She could feel her pulse hammering in her throat, could feel the weight of every eye in the ballroom. But she was done being talked about like she wasn't there, done being treated like something that happened to, rather than someone who made her own choices. I'm standing right here, she repeated, stronger this time. And I can speak for myself. Mr. Hartley asked me to dance. I said yes. That's all that happened. Be that as it may, Judge Morrison began. That's all that happened, Mei Lin said again. Unless you're suggesting that I'm not capable of deciding who I dance with? Morrison flushed. Of course not. But you must understand how this looks. A man of Lucas's standing, a woman in your position, people will talk. They'll make assumptions about your character, about his intentions. They're already talking, Mei Lin pointed out. They've been talking about me since the day I arrived in this town. At least now they have something interesting to say. A surprised laugh rippled through the crowd. Even Sarah looked shocked. Reed's face had gone red. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This kind of attitude is exactly why I asked her to dance. Lucas stepped forward, positioning himself slightly between Mei Lin and the council. Because unlike most people in this town, Miss Chen says what she means. She doesn't hide behind polite fictions or worry about what everyone else thinks. She's honest. It's refreshing. Honest? Reed's voice dripped sarcasm. Is that what we're calling it now? Thomas! Judge Morrison put a warning hand on Reed's arm. That's enough. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, Lucas Hartley is making a fool of himself over a Chinese seamstress who... Lucas moved so fast that Mei Lin didn't see it coming. One moment he was standing beside her. The next he had Reed by the collar, lifting him half off his feet. Finish that sentence, Lucas said quietly. Please. The ballroom went dead silent. Reed's eyes were wide, his face going from red to white. Lucas? No, go ahead. Tell me what you were going to say about Miss Chen, about her character, her worth. I'm very interested to hear it. Let him go. Judge Morrison's voice was sharp. Lucas, this isn't helping. Neither is letting Reed insult a woman who's done nothing wrong except dance with someone she has every right to dance with. Lucas didn't release his grip. Seems to me the only people behaving inappropriately here are the ones who think they have a say in who I spend my time with. Pastor Williams stepped forward. Lucas, please, violence isn't the answer. Neither is letting bullies run roughshod over people. But Lucas released Reed, shoving him back toward the other council members. You want to have a conversation about appropriate behavior? Fine. But you do it with respect, or you don't do it at all. Reed straightened his collar, trying to recover his dignity. This isn't over. I certainly hope not. Lucas turned back to Mei Lin and offered his hand. I believe we have 2 more dances. The band, which had stopped playing during the confrontation, started up again, shakily at first, then with more confidence. Around them, couples slowly returned to the dance floor, though the atmosphere had changed completely. What had been festive was now tense, charged with the kind of energy that comes right before a storm. Mei Lin took Lucas's hand, aware that this was a choice, not just a dance anymore, but a statement, a line being drawn. You didn't have to do that, she said as they began to move. Yeah, I did. Lucas's voice was tight. Reed had no right. He had every right. He's on the town council. He's respected, important. Mei Lin met his eyes. I'm nobody. A seamstress. An outsider. In this town, men like him get to say whatever they want about women like me. Not anymore, they don't. The certainty in his voice made something crack in Mei Lin's chest. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that one man standing up to Thomas Reed could change anything. But she'd been in Redemption Creek too long to believe in fairy tales. You don't know what you've started, she said. Maybe not. Lucas pulled her slightly closer, breaking every rule of propriety again. But I know I'm not sorry. They danced the last two dances in silence. Around them, the ball continued, couples spinning, music playing, people laughing and drinking and pretending everything was normal. But Mei Lin could feel the shift, could see it in the way people avoided looking at them directly, in the clusters of women whispering behind their fans, in Thomas Reed's furious expression as he watched from the corner. When the final song ended, Lucas walked her to where Sarah was waiting. He bowed formally, properly, like she was a lady from Boston rather than a Chinese seamstress from nowhere. Thank you for the dances, Miss Chen. Thank you for asking, Mr. Hartley. He smiled at her use of his formal name. Get home safe. You too. He left then, walking through the crowd with his head high and his shoulders straight. People parted for him automatically, the way they always did. But this time, Mei Lin saw something different in their faces. Not just respect, but confusion. Maybe even a little bit of fear. Lucas Hartley had broken the rules tonight. And in Redemption Creek, breaking the rules had consequences. Sarah and James walked Mei Lin home, all three of them silent until they reached her door. Then Sarah grabbed her in a fierce hug. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen, Sarah whispered, or the stupidest. But Mei Lin hugged her back, holding on tight. James cleared his throat. For what it's worth, I think Lucas Hartley is a good man. If he's on your side, he's not on my side, Mei Lin said. He was being kind, that's all. But even as she said it, she remembered the weight of his hand at her waist, the way he'd looked at her when he filled out her dance card. The barely controlled fury in his voice when Reed had started to insult her. That hadn't been kindness. That had been something else entirely. She said goodnight to Sarah and James, then climbed the stairs to her small room above the dress shop. The blue silk dress suddenly felt too heavy, too beautiful for someone like her. She took it off carefully, hanging it where she could see it in the lamplight. Her dance card was still attached to her wrist. She slipped it off and stared at Lucas's name written in his rough handwriting over and over again. 7 dances. 7 times he'd chosen her when he could have had anyone. Mei Lin set the card on her dresser and walked to the window. Down below, Redemption Creek was dark and quiet, everyone home from the ball now. In a few hours, the sun would rise and people would start talking about what had happened tonight. They'd analyze every dance, every look, every word. They'd turn it into scandal and gossip and ammunition. And Mei Lin would wake up still invisible, still an outsider, still struggling to survive in a town that had never wanted her. Except Lucas Hartley had seen her tonight. Really seen her. And for 7 dances, she hadn't been invisible at all. Mei Lin pressed her hand against the cool window glass and let herself wonder, just for a moment, what might happen if she let herself be seen again. Then she blew out the lamp and went to bed, trying not to think about the storm that was surely coming. The storm came faster than Mei Lin expected. She woke to someone pounding on her door hard enough to rattle the frame. For a disoriented moment, she thought it was still night, but pale morning light was already creeping through her window. She'd overslept, something she never did. The pounding came again. Miss Chen, open this door immediately. Mrs. Pemberton. Mei Lin's stomach dropped. She pulled on her robe and hurried downstairs, her mind already racing through possibilities. The wedding dress. Had something happened to it? Had she missed a fitting she'd forgotten about? She opened the door to find Mrs. Pemberton flanked by 2 other women from the church auxiliary. All 3 of them looked like they'd dressed in a hurry. Their hair not quite perfect. Their expressions ranging from outraged to uncomfortable. Mrs. Pemberton, don't. Mrs. Pemberton's voice could have cut glass. Don't say a word, just listen. The council met this morning, emergency session, and they've made a decision about your situation. Mei Lin's chest tightened. My situation? Your employment, your residence, your continued presence in Redemption Creek. Mrs. Pemberton looked her up and down with barely concealed disgust. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences for last night's display? I danced. That's all I did. You made a spectacle of yourself with Lucas Hartley in front of the entire town. You embarrassed him, embarrassed all of us, and frankly, you've proven that you don't understand your place here. One of the other women, Mrs. Fletcher, Margaret's mother, cleared her throat. Emily, perhaps we should— No. Mrs. Pemberton held up a hand. She needs to hear this. Miss Chen, the town council has determined that your current living arrangement is no longer appropriate for an unmarried woman without family. They're also concerned about the influence you might have on other young women in the community. Influence? Mei Lin's voice came out sharper than she'd intended. I sew dresses. I keep to myself. What influence could I possibly— You encouraged Lucas Hartley's inappropriate attention. You allowed him to monopolize your company for an entire evening, creating the appearance of impropriety. Whether you intended it or not, you've damaged both your reputation and his. Mei Lin felt something cold and hard settling in her stomach. So the council sent you to tell me to leave town? Not exactly. Mrs. Pemberton's expression shifted into something that might have been satisfaction. They've arranged a more suitable situation for you. Albert Monroe has agreed to take you as his wife. The wedding will be next week. The world tilted sideways. What? It's a generous offer, really. You'll have a home, a family, a proper place in this community. Mr. Monroe is a respected member of— I don't want to marry Albert Monroe. Mei Lin's voice sounded distant in her own ears, like it belonged to someone else. I barely know him. You don't have a choice. Mrs. Pemberton's tone softened slightly, but the steel underneath remained. Your situation here is untenable. You have no family, no real prospects, and after last night, no reputation worth protecting. Mr. Monroe is willing to overlook all of that. You should be grateful. Grateful. The word tasted like poison. You want me to be grateful that I'm being forced into marriage with a man old enough to be my father because I dared to dance with someone? Mrs. Fletcher shifted uncomfortably. Miss Chen, no one is forcing— Aren't you? Mei Lin looked at each of them in turn. What happens if I refuse? Do I get to keep my room above the shop? Keep my work? The silence was answer enough. Mrs. Pemberton drew herself up. The council has spoken with your landlord. Your lease will not be renewed. And as for work, well, I'm afraid I'll be taking my business elsewhere. I'm sure others will do the same. You're blackmailing me. We're offering you a solution to a problem of your own making. Mrs. Pemberton's voice went hard again. You have until Friday to give Mr. Monroe your answer. I suggest you think very carefully about your options. They left without waiting for a response, their footsteps echoing down the stairs like a death knell. Mei Lin stood in her doorway, shaking. Around her, the room that had been her home for 6 years suddenly felt like a cage. The walls were closing in, the air too thick to breathe. She'd known there would be consequences, had expected gossip, maybe some lost work. But this coordinated attack, this systematic dismantling of everything she'd built, this was something else entirely. This was Thomas Reed getting his revenge. She was still standing there when Sarah burst through the door 20 minutes later, her face flushed and her eyes bright with fury. Tell me it's not true. Mei Lin sank onto her cutting table stool. What did you hear? That the council is forcing you to marry Albert Monroe, that they're evicting you, that Mrs. Pemberton came here this morning and— Sarah stopped, really looking at Mei Lin for the first time. Oh no, it is true. They gave me until Friday to decide. Decide? Sarah's voice rose. There's nothing to decide. You're not marrying that man. You can't— May, he worked his first wife into an early grave. Everyone knows it. And his children— I know. Mei Lin's voice was flat. But what choice do I have? If I refuse, I lose my home, my work. They'll make it impossible for me to stay here. Then don't stay here. Come stay with us. James and I have room, and— For how long? Mei Lin met her friend's eyes. A week? A month? Until the council decides that you're harboring an unwanted woman and starts making things difficult for your business too. She shook her head. I won't put you in that position. Sarah grabbed her hands. This is because of last night. Because Lucas danced with you. This is because I forgot my place. The bitterness in Mei Lin's voice surprised even her. I let myself think that one night could change things, that being seen, being chosen, might matter. But it doesn't. Not for someone like me. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. Mei Lin pulled her hands away and stood, pacing to the window. Down below, Redemption Creek was going about its morning business. People walking to the general store, children heading to school, everything normal and unchanged except for her entire life falling apart. I was stupid to think anything could be different. You weren't stupid. You were brave. Bravery doesn't pay rent, Sarah. They sat in heavy silence for a long moment. Then Sarah said, "What are you going to do?" Mei Lin didn't have an answer. The rest of the day passed in a blur of customers who weren't really customers, women coming by to collect dresses they'd ordered months ago, suddenly claiming the fit wasn't quite right, asking for their deposits back, making excuses that were transparently false. By evening, Mei Lin had lost 4 clients and gained a headache that felt like someone was driving nails into her skull. She was closing up the shop, hands shaking as she locked the door, when she heard the horse. Lucas Hartley dismounted in front of her building like he owned the street. Maybe he did. Mei Lin wasn't sure anymore what was real and what was just another piece of this nightmare she'd stumbled into. "Mr. Hartley." She didn't have the energy to be surprised. "Come to see the damage you've caused?" He flinched like she'd hit him. "I heard what the council did." "Did you? That was fast. Almost like someone wanted you to hear about it." "May, don't." She held up a hand. "Please don't. I can't. I don't have the strength for whatever this is right now." Lucas looked at her for a long moment. In the fading light, his face was all hard angles and shadows. "Can I come inside?" "Why?" "Because we need to talk, and I'd rather not do it in the middle of the street where everyone can hear." Mei Lin wanted to refuse. Wanted to tell him that talking wouldn't change anything, that his interference had already cost her everything. But something in his expression stopped her. He looked tired, angry, and underneath all of that, genuinely worried. She unlocked the door. Upstairs, her room looked the same as it had that morning, but everything felt different now. The blue dress still hung where she'd left it, a reminder of how quickly things could change. Her dance card sat on the dresser, Lucas's name written 7 times like a promise that had already been broken. Lucas stood in the middle of her small room, looking out of place and too large for the space. "The council came to see me this morning, too." "Let me guess. They told you to stay away from me." "Among other things." He turned to face her. "Reed's claiming I took advantage of you, that I used my position to coerce you into dancing with me, that I've damaged your reputation and put you in an impossible situation. He's not wrong about the impossible situation. He's wrong about everything else." Lucas's voice was sharp. "I didn't coerce you. I asked. You said yes. That's all that happened." "That's not how they see it." "I don't care how they see it." He took a step toward her. "May, they're trying to force you into marriage with Albert Monroe." "I know. I was there when Mrs. Pemberton delivered the good news. You can't marry him." "Why not? He's respectable, established. Everything a woman in my position should want, according to the fine people of Redemption Creek. He's also 53 years old with 5 kids and a track record of treating his wives like unpaid labor." "So I've heard." Mei Lin sank onto her bed, suddenly exhausted. "But what choice do I have, Lucas? They've made it clear. Marry Monroe or leave, and I have nowhere to go." Lucas was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Careful, like he was picking his way through broken glass. "There's another option." "Is there?" "Because I'm fresh out of ideas here." "Marry me instead." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and absurd. Mei Lin stared at him. "What?" "Marry me." Lucas said it again, more firmly this time. "Not to save you. I know you don't need saving, but to stand beside you, to tell the council and Reed and everyone else in this damn town that they don't get to decide who you are or what you're worth. You're insane. Probably." He moved closer, crouching down so they were eye level. "But I'm also serious. We could do this, May. A real marriage, legal and binding. It would solve the problem the council created. It would create a dozen new problems. Maybe. But at least they'd be problems we chose, not ones forced on us." Mei Lin's mind was reeling. "Lucas, we barely know each other. We've had one conversation that lasted longer than 5 minutes and 7 dances that were more about making a statement than what? Actually enjoying each other's company?" He smiled slightly. "Because I did. Enjoy it, I mean. More than I've enjoyed anything in a long time. That's not a reason to get married, isn't it? People marry for worse reasons. Money, property, because their families arrange it. He paused. Because a town council decides they should. Maylin stood, needing to put distance between them. This is crazy. You're one of the most powerful men in the territory. You could have anyone. Why would you tie yourself to someone like me? Someone like you? Lucas stood too, his expression hardening. You mean someone smart enough to build a business from nothing? Someone brave enough to stand up to Thomas Reed in front of half the town? Someone who's survived 6 years in a place that didn't want them and came out stronger for it? Someone Chinese, Maylin said flatly. Someone poor. Someone so far beneath your social station that marrying me would be the smartest decision I've made in 5 years. The certainty in his voice stopped her cold. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. Look, I'm not good at this, at talking about feelings or whatever this is. But I know what I saw last night. I saw a woman who refused to be invisible, even when everyone around her was trying to pretend she didn't exist. I saw someone with more courage and honesty than half the respectable people in that ballroom. He met her eyes. And I saw someone I'd like to get to know better, if you're willing. Maylin's heart was doing something complicated and painful in her chest. This isn't a fairy tale, Lucas. Marriage won't fix everything. The town will still hate me. Reed will still come after us. And you, her voice cracked slightly, you'll wake up one day and realize you made a terrible mistake. Maybe. He took a step toward her. Or maybe I'll wake up and realize I finally did something right. You don't know me. Then let me. Another step. Marry me, Maylin. Give us both a chance to figure this out without the council and Reed and everyone else deciding our future for us. She wanted to say no. Every practical bone in her body was screaming that this was reckless, that she'd be jumping from one impossible situation into another, that marrying a man she barely knew was just trading one form of captivity for another. But then she thought about Albert Monroe, about 5 motherless children and a house that needed constant work, and a man who saw her as a solution to his domestic problems, not as a person in her own right. She thought about losing this room, this business, this small piece of independence she'd fought so hard to build. And she thought about Lucas's hand at her waist, his name written 7 times on her dance card, the way he'd looked at Thomas Reed and said, "Not anymore, they don't." If I say yes, she heard herself say, I want to be clear about something. This isn't me being rescued. This isn't you saving the poor, helpless Chinese woman from her terrible fate. This is a partnership, a choice we're both making. Lucas's expression shifted into something that might have been relief. Agreed. And I'm not going to be a decoration on your arm or a silent addition to your household. If we do this, I get a say. In everything. Wouldn't have it any other way. I'm serious, Lucas. I've spent 6 years making myself small to survive. I'm done with that. If you want me to marry you, you get all of me. Opinions, stubbornness, everything. No pretending to be someone I'm not. Good. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face. I like who you are. Maylin took a shaky breath. This is insane. Completely. We're going to regret this. Probably. The entire town is going to lose their minds. Definitely. Lucas held out his hand. So, what do you say? Maylin looked at his outstretched hand, calloused from years of ranch work, steady and strong and offering her something that felt like hope, even though it was probably just another kind of trouble. She'd spent 6 years being careful, being practical, surviving. Maybe it was time to try living instead. She took his hand. Yes. The word came out smaller than she'd intended, but Lucas heard it anyway. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid and real. Yes? He repeated like he needed confirmation. Yes. Stronger this time. I'll marry you. Lucas pulled her into a hug that lifted her off her feet. Maylin made a startled sound, then found herself laughing, actually laughing, for the first time since Mrs. Pemberton had pounded on her door that morning. When? She asked when he set her down. Tomorrow if we can manage it. This week at the latest. His expression sobered. Before the council can find another way to interfere. They're going to fight this. Let them. Lucas's jaw set in a way that reminded Maylin why people were careful around him. I've got the best lawyer in 3 territories on retainer. If Reed wants a fight, he'll get one. What about your reputation? Your business? You're going to lose friends over this. If they can't handle me marrying someone I respect, they weren't friends worth keeping. He cupped her face in his hands, gentle, despite the roughness of his palms. May, I meant what I said. This is my choice, mine and yours. Nobody else gets a vote. Maylin wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that choice mattered more than circumstance, that wanting something badly enough could make it real. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too. Lucas's thumb brushed across her cheek. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe with someone else. They stood there for a moment, holding on to each other in the fading light. Outside, Redemption Creek was settling into evening, shops closing, families gathering for dinner, everything continuing on like the world hadn't just tilted sideways for 2 people who'd decided to bet everything on 7 dances and a wild hope. Then Lucas stepped back, suddenly businesslike. I'll talk to Judge Morrison first thing tomorrow. He'll try to refuse, but he owes me enough favors that he'll cave eventually. We'll need a license, witnesses. Can you trust Sarah and her husband? With my life. Good. I'll bring my foreman, Jack. He's been with me since before Catherine. Lucas caught himself. Since the beginning. He's solid. The mention of his first wife sent a small chill through Maylin. Lucas, are you sure about this? Really sure? Because if you're doing this out of some sense of obligation, or because you feel guilty about what happened, I'm doing this because I want to. He met her eyes. I won't pretend I'm not still grieving Catherine. Probably always will be, in some way. But she's gone, and I'm still here, and life keeps happening whether we're ready for it or not. He paused. When I saw you at that dance, standing there like you were daring the world to see you, I don't know, something shifted. For the first time in 5 years, I wanted to be part of something again. Part of someone's life who wasn't a memory. Maylin felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. I don't want to be a replacement for her. You're not. Lucas said it with such conviction that she almost believed him. You're something entirely different. Someone I'm choosing, not someone I'm trying to recreate or hold on to. He squeezed her hand. If that makes sense. It did. More than she wanted to admit. So we're really doing this, she said, unless you've changed your mind in the last 5 minutes. Maylin thought about Albert Monroe, about Mrs. Pemberton's satisfied expression, about Thomas Reed's certainty that he could control her, shape her, force her into the box he thought she belonged in. No, she said, I haven't changed my mind. Lucas left an hour later with a plan and a promise to return in the morning. Maylin watched him ride away, then turned to find Sarah standing in her doorway with an expression of complete shock. Tell me I didn't just hear what I think I heard. Depends on what you think you heard. Sarah pushed into the room. Did Lucas Hartley just ask you to marry him? Yes. And did you say yes? Yes. Are you completely out of your mind? Maylin sank onto her bed. Probably. But what else was I supposed to do? Sarah sat beside her, grabbing both her hands. May, Lucas Hartley. You're going to marry Lucas Hartley. I know. Do you? Because this is huge. Sarah stopped, her expression shifting from shock to something more complicated. You're going to be the most hated woman in Redemption Creek. I'm already the most hated woman in Redemption Creek. No, you were ignored, dismissed. This is different. This is you claiming space in a world that doesn't want you there. People are going to come for you, May. Hard. Let them. The words came out with more confidence than Maylin felt, but she held on to them anyway. I'm tired of making myself small. Tired of apologizing for existing. If I'm going to be hated anyway, I might as well be hated on my own terms. Sarah studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled, fierce and bright and proud. You're really going to do this? I really am. Then we better get you ready. Because if you're going to marry the most powerful rancher in the territory, you're going to need a better dress than that blue silk. They spent the rest of the evening planning, not a wedding, exactly, but a battle strategy. Sarah would spread the word carefully, making sure the right people knew before Reed could control the narrative. James would handle the legal paperwork, using his connections to expedite the license. And Maylin would finish her outstanding orders so no one could claim she'd left work undone. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't a fairy tale. But it was real, and it was theirs, and that had to be enough. Morning came too fast and not fast enough. Maylin woke before dawn, her stomach churning with nerves and something that might have been excitement. Today, Lucas would talk to Judge Morrison. Today, they'd set the wheels in motion for a marriage that would change everything. She was making tea when the first rock came through her window. The glass shattered inward, spraying across her floor in 1,000 glittering pieces. Maylin jumped back, heart hammering, as a second rock followed. Then a third. Outside, she could hear voices, angry, ugly voices shouting things she tried not to understand. "Chinese whore! Go back where you came from! Leave Mr. Hartley alone!" Maylin pressed herself against the wall, shaking. The rocks kept coming, each one punching through glass that was already broken, each impact accompanied by more shouting. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. She heard Lucas's voice, low and dangerous, heard other voices responding, defensive, making excuses, heard the sound of horses moving away. A minute later, Lucas was pounding on her door. May, let me in." She stumbled downstairs, her hands still shaking. Lucas took one look at her face and pulled her against his chest, wrapping his arms around her like he could shield her from everything outside. "I'm sorry," he said into her hair. "I'm so sorry. I should have posted someone to watch your place, should have anticipated. It's not your fault." "The hell it isn't." He pulled back, his face tight with fury. "Who was it? Did you see?" "3 men. I didn't recognize the voices." Lucas's jaw worked. "Reed's behind this. Has to be." "You don't know that." "Don't I?" He gestured at the broken window. "This happened less than 12 hours after I proposed. Reed sending a message." Maylin looked at the shattered glass, the rocks scattered across her floor. "Maybe we should wait. Give things time to calm down before—" "No." Lucas's voice was flat. "Absolutely not. That's exactly what they want. For us to back down. To prove they can intimidate us into submission." He cupped her face in his hands. "We move forward. Today. Now. Before they can escalate." "Lucas? Unless you've changed your mind. If you have, I understand. This is already worse than I thought it would be, and it's only going to get harder." Maylin thought about the voices outside, about rocks flying through her window in the pre-dawn darkness, about years of being invisible, being dismissed, being told in 1,000 small ways that she didn't belong. "I haven't changed my mind," she said. Lucas smiled, grim and determined. "Then let's get married." Judge Morrison refused, just like Lucas predicted. Said it was too rushed, too scandalous, that he needed time to consider the implications. Lucas reminded him about a certain property dispute 3 years ago that the judge had wanted resolved quietly. Morrison caved within 20 minutes. The license was harder. The clerk claimed there was a waiting period that everyone knew didn't exist. Lucas suggested they call the territorial governor, who happened to be a personal friend. The clerk found the paperwork immediately. By noon, they were standing in Judge Morrison's chambers with Sarah and James on one side, Lucas's foreman, Jack, on the other, and the judge looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "This is highly irregular," Morrison said for the 3rd time. "So is throwing rocks through a woman's window," Lucas replied calmly. "Can we get on with this?" Morrison sighed and opened his book. "Very well. Miss Chen, Mr. Hartley, please join hands." Maylin's hands were ice cold despite the warmth of the room. Lucas took them gently, his grip steady and sure. The words Morrison spoke seemed to come from very far away. Maylin heard herself responding at the right moments, heard Lucas's deep voice making promises that sounded impossible in the afternoon light. Then Morrison said, "By the power vested in me by the territory, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Just like that, everything changed. Lucas leaned down and kissed her, brief and almost formal, but his hands trembled slightly where they held hers. "Mrs. Hartley," he said quietly, testing the words. "Mr. Hartley," she replied, and managed to smile. Sarah was crying. Jack looked uncomfortable but pleased. Judge Morrison just looked resigned. They signed the papers in Morrison's office, making it legal and binding. Maylin's hand shook as she wrote her new name for the first time. Maylin Hartley. It looked strange, foreign, like it belonged to someone else. "It's done," Lucas said as they stepped out into the afternoon sunlight. "You're safe now. Reed can't touch you." But Maylin wasn't thinking about Reed. She was thinking about the ranch, Lucas's home, which was now supposedly her home too. She was thinking about the life she'd just committed to, the man she barely knew who was now her husband. She was thinking about how quickly everything had changed and wondering if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. Lucas must have seen something in her expression because he squeezed her hand. Having second thoughts? Third and fourth thoughts, actually. He laughed, surprised and genuine. Fair enough. For what it's worth, I'm terrified too. You don't look terrified. I'm good at hiding it. He helped her onto his horse, then swung up behind her. Come on, let's go home before the gossips start gathering. But they were too late for that. By the time they'd ridden 3 blocks, a crowd had formed outside the courthouse. Word had spread. Of course it had. In a town the size of Redemption Creek, news traveled faster than wildfire. Thomas Reed stood at the front of the crowd, his face purple with rage. This is an outrage! He pointed at Lucas and Maylin like they were evidence of some terrible crime. Judge Morrison, you can't possibly approve of this farce. Morrison appeared in the courthouse doorway, looking tired. It's done, Thomas. Legal and binding. On what grounds? They've known each other for less than a day. On the grounds that they're both adults capable of making their own decisions. Morrison's voice was sharp. Unless you're suggesting I should have denied a marriage license to 2 consenting parties for no legal reason? Reed's eyes narrowed. I'm suggesting that Lucas Hartley used his influence to coerce a vulnerable woman and, I'm right here. Maylin's voice cut through the noise. And I can speak for myself. Nobody coerced me into anything. I chose this. I chose him. The crowd went silent. Reed recovered quickly. You don't understand what you've done. The implications, I understand perfectly. Maylin straightened her spine, forcing herself to meet Reed's eyes, even though her heart was racing. I understand that you tried to force me into marrying a man I didn't choose. I understand that you and your counsel thought you could control me, could push me into a corner and make me disappear into someone else's life. And I understand that you're angry because I found another way. This isn't about control, isn't it? Lucas's voice was quiet, but carried an edge that made several people step back. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're upset that a woman made a choice you didn't approve of. This isn't over, Reed said. Not by a long shot. You think you've won, Hartley? You've just painted a target on both your backs. Then I guess we'll have to watch our step. Lucas clicked his tongue, and his horse started forward. The crowd parted reluctantly, people staring at them with expressions ranging from shock to fury to something that might have been fear. As they rode through town, Maylin could feel the weight of every eye following them, could hear the whispers starting again, spreading like poison through the afternoon air. She'd married Lucas Hartley, and Redemption Creek would never forgive either of them. The Hartley Ranch spread across the valley like something out of a dream Maylin had never dared to have. Rolling pastures dotted with cattle, a main house built from timber and stone that looked more like a small hotel than a home, outbuildings that were better maintained than most houses in town. It was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. Beautiful and completely foreign and now supposedly hers. Lucas helped her down from the horse, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. I know it's a lot to take in. That's an understatement. Maylin stared at the house, trying to reconcile this sprawling property with the cramped room above the dress shop that had been her entire world for 6 years. How many people live here? Right now, just me and the hands. But the house has 8 bedrooms, so there's plenty of space. He cleared his throat. I thought you might want your own room, at least at first, until we figure out how this is going to work. The consideration in his voice made something loosen in Maylin's chest. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You haven't met the staff. As if on cue, the front door opened and a woman emerged who looked like she could intimidate a grizzly bear into submission. She was somewhere in her 50s, built solid, with iron gray hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that assessed Maylin in one sharp glance. So this is her, the woman said. Not a question. Rosa, this is my wife, Maylin. May, Rosa runs the house. Has for the past 15 years. Rosa's expression didn't change. Mrs. Hartley. The formal address sounded wrong coming from this woman who clearly viewed Lucas as more than just an employer. Maylin had the distinct impression she was being evaluated and found wanting. Just Maylin is fine, she said. No, it's not. Lucas's voice was firm, but not unkind. You're mistress of this house now. Rosa, I expect everyone to treat her with the same respect they show me. Rosa's mouth tightened. Of course, Mr. Hartley. The tension was thick enough to cut. Maylin wanted to say something to ease it, but what? She was an intruder here, a stranger claiming space in a home that had belonged to someone else first. Catherine's home, Catherine's staff, Catherine's life. I'll show you to your room, Lucas said, his hand settling at the small of her back. We can sort out the rest later. The house was even more overwhelming inside. High ceilings, wide hallways, rooms that seemed designed for entertaining dozens of people. Everything was well maintained, but slightly dusty, like no one had really lived here in a while. Like Lucas had been existing, rather than living, going through the motions in a house too big for one person. He led her up a staircase to the second floor, past several closed doors, finally stopping at one near the end of the hall. This was supposed to be the nursery, he said quietly. We never got that far. I've been using it for storage, but I had Rosa clear it out this morning. Maylin pushed open the door to find a spacious room with windows overlooking the valley. Someone had made up the bed with fresh linens, brought in a dresser, and a small desk. It was simple but comfortable, more space than she'd had in years. Your room is across the hall, Lucas added. If you need anything. The careful distance in his voice made Maylin turn to look at him. He was standing in the doorway, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed in. This man who owned everything as far as she could see, suddenly uncertain in his own home. Lucas, we need to talk about this. About what? About all of it. The sleeping arrangements, the staff, how this is actually going to work. She sat on the edge of the bed. We got married to solve a problem, but we didn't talk about what comes after. Lucas leaned against the doorframe. What do you want to come after? I don't know. I hadn't thought past surviving the next week. Maylin looked down at her hands, at the plain gold band Lucas had bought from the jeweler during their frantic morning. But we're here now, and people are going to have expectations. About us. About this marriage. Let them expect whatever they want. We know the truth. Do we? She met his eyes. Because I'm not sure what the truth is anymore. Is this a real marriage or a convenient arrangement? Are we partners or strangers sharing a house? Do you want me here because you actually want me, or because you felt guilty about what Reed did? Lucas crossed the room and sat beside her, the bed creaking under his weight. I want you here. That's the truth. Everything else, I don't know, May. I don't have all the answers, but I know I'd rather figure it out with you than watch you get forced into marriage with Albert Monroe. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement. No, it's not. He rubbed his face, looking tired. I'm not good at this, at talking about feelings or making pretty speeches. Catherine used to say I communicated better with horses than people. The casual mention of his first wife sent a small jolt through Maylin. Do you want to talk about her? Not particularly. Lucas stood and walked to the window. But you should probably know some things. About what happened. About why the staff might be less than welcoming. Maylin waited, giving him space to find the words. Catherine was everything this town thought a rancher's wife should be, Lucas said finally. Educated, well-mannered, from a good family back east. When I married her, people acted like I'd won some kind of prize, like I'd proven I belonged in their world. He paused. She hated it here. The ranch? All of it. The isolation, the work, the weather. She tried to like it, tried to be what everyone expected, but she was miserable. His voice went rough. I knew it, and I didn't do anything. Kept thinking she'd adjust, that she'd learn to love it like I did. Then she got sick, and by the time I realized how bad it was too late. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? Lucas turned to face her. I brought her to a place she hated, made her try to be someone she wasn't, and when she needed me to see her, really see her, I was too busy running the ranch to notice how unhappy she was. Maylin stood and walked to him. Is that why you married me? To do it differently this time? Maybe partly. He looked at her, and there was something raw in his expression. But also because when I look at you, I don't see someone who needs to be shaped into what other people expect. You already know who you are. You fought for it. And I admire that. I want to be around someone who isn't pretending. I'm pretending right now, Maylin said quietly. Pretending I'm not terrified. Pretending I know how to be a rancher's wife. Pretending this doesn't feel like someone else's life. Then we're both pretending. Lucas's mouth quirked into something almost like a smile. Maybe we can stop, together. Before Mei Lin could respond, there was a knock on the door. Jack, Lucas's foreman, stood in the hallway looking uncomfortable. Sorry to interrupt, boss, but we've got a situation. Lucas's expression shifted immediately. What kind of situation? Thomas Reed just showed up with 3 other council members. They're demanding to speak with you. Say it's official business. Of course they are. Lucas looked at Mei Lin. You don't have to come down. This is my problem to handle. It's our problem now, Mei Lin said. I'm coming. Jack's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. They're in the front parlor. Rosa put them there before I could tell her to make them wait outside. The 4 council members looked absurdly formal, sitting in Lucas's parlor, like they were conducting a state dinner instead of an ambush. Thomas Reed had brought Judge Morrison, Pastor Williams, and Henry Blackwell from the bank. All 4 men stood when Lucas and Mei Lin entered, their expressions ranging from uncomfortable to openly hostile. Gentlemen, Lucas said evenly, this is unexpected. Is it? Reed's voice was cold. You marry a woman you barely know in what can only be described as a rushed and questionable ceremony, and you're surprised when the community has concerns. The community? Lucas crossed his arms. Or just the 4 of you? The entire town is talking, Pastor Williams said. He looked genuinely distressed, like this whole situation pained him. Lucas, you have to understand how this looks. Yesterday you were dancing with Miss Chen. Mrs. Hartley, Lucas corrected. Williams flushed. Mrs. Hartley, and today you're married. People are wondering if there wasn't some impropriety that necessitated such haste. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Mei Lin felt her face heat. There was no impropriety, Lucas said, his voice dropping into dangerous territory. And I'd be very careful about suggesting otherwise. We're not suggesting anything, Judge Morrison interjected quickly. We're simply concerned about the circumstances, the speed of the marriage, the lack of any courtship period, the fact that Mrs. Hartley was in a vulnerable position, the fact that your counsel tried to force her into marrying Albert Monroe? Lucas finished. Yes, she was in a vulnerable position, one you created. We were trying to help, Reed snapped, to provide a solution to her situation. By selling her off to the highest bidder? Mei Lin's voice came out sharper than she intended. That's not help. That's human trafficking. Blackwell's eyes went wide. Now see here. No, you see here. Mei Lin stepped forward, years of being dismissed and talked over fueling her words. You don't get to pretend this is about my welfare. This is about control, about punishing me for dancing with someone you didn't approve of, about making an example out of anyone who doesn't fit into your narrow idea of how this town should work. That's not true, Pastor Williams said, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Then explain why my customers all canceled their orders the day after the ball. Explain why Mrs. Pemberton came to my door with an ultimatum. Explain why rocks were thrown through my window this morning. Mei Lin's voice rose. You want to talk about impropriety? Let's talk about a town council that thinks they can dictate who a woman marries because she dared to be seen in public. Reed's face had gone purple. You have no right to speak to us this way. You're nothing but my wife. Lucas's voice cut through the room like a blade. Finish that sentence, Reed. Please, give me an excuse. The tension in the room ratcheted up to breaking point. Jack had appeared in the doorway, his hand resting casually on his belt near where Mei Lin suspected he kept a gun. Rosa was behind him, arms crossed, looking like she was ready to physically throw the council members out if necessary. Judge Morrison cleared his throat. Perhaps we should all calm down. Perhaps you should explain why you're really here, Lucas said. The 4 men exchanged glances. Finally, Blackwell spoke. There are concerns about the legitimacy of this marriage, questions about whether undue influence or coercion was involved. Whose concerns? Mei Lin demanded. The towns, the territories. There are protocols for these things, investigations that can be initiated when a marriage appears. Appears what? Lucas took a step toward them. Appears to cross the wrong social boundaries? Appears to challenge your authority? Say what you really mean. Reed stood. What I mean is that this marriage is a farce, and everyone knows it. You married a Chinese woman barely 48 hours after dancing with her. Either you've lost your mind, or she's manipulated you somehow. Or this is some elaborate scheme to avoid the consequences of improper behavior. Or Maylin said quietly. Two adults made a choice that's none of your business. Everything that happens in this town is our business, Reed shot back. We have a responsibility to maintain standards, to protect people from making rash decisions that could what? Upset the natural order? Lucas's laugh was bitter. You're not protecting anyone, Reed. You're protecting your own power, your ability to tell people how to live, who to marry, what to think, and you're furious that May and I found a way around you. This isn't over, Reed said. We have the authority to investigate marriages that appear fraudulent or coerced. And I guarantee you this marriage will be under scrutiny. Investigate all you want, Lucas said. You won't find anything because there's nothing to find. We're married, legally, with a license signed by a judge and witnessed by people you can't intimidate. It's done. We'll see about that. Reed headed for the door, the other council members following, but he paused at the threshold, looking back at Mei Lin with unconcealed contempt. You think you've won, that you've somehow beaten the system, but you're still just a Chinese seamstress playing dress-up in a dead woman's house. Sooner or later, everyone will see through this charade, including him. The words hit their mark. Mei Lin felt them lodge somewhere under her ribs, sharp and cold. Lucas moved toward Reed, but Mei Lin grabbed his arm. Don't. He's not worth it. Reed smiled. At least she knows her place. Get out. Lucas's voice was barely above a whisper, but something in it made even Reed pale. Get out of my house. And if you or anyone else from your council sets foot on my property again without an invitation, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. The four men left in a flurry of indignant mutterings and barely veiled threats. The moment the door closed behind them, Lucas turned to Mei Lin. Are you okay? She wanted to say yes, wanted to pretend Reed's words hadn't affected her, but her hands were shaking and her throat felt tight. I think I need to be alone for a while. Lucas looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded. I'll be in the study if you need me. Mei Lin made it back to her room before the tears came. She sat on the edge of her bed, in this room, in this house, that all belonged to someone else first, and let herself cry. For the life she'd left behind, small and constrained as it was, for the uncertainty of what came next, for the fear that Reed was right, that this was all temporary, that eventually Lucas would realize he'd made a terrible mistake. A soft knock interrupted her crying. Go away, Lucas. It's not Lucas. Rosa's voice, still formal but slightly less cold. May I come in? Mei Lin wiped her eyes. Why? Because I have something to say, and I'd rather say it in private. Against her better judgment, Mei Lin opened the door. Rosa stood in the hallway holding a tea tray, her expression unreadable. I'm not in the mood for tea. Then don't drink it. Rosa pushed past her into the room and set the tray on the desk. But you should probably hear what I have to say anyway. Mei Lin closed the door. If you're here to tell me I don't belong in this house, Reed already made that abundantly clear. Reed is a small-minded fool who's terrified of anything he can't control. Rosa poured 2 cups of tea with practiced efficiency. I'm here to tell you that you handled yourself well down there. Better than Catherine ever did. The unexpected comparison caught Mei Lin off guard. I thought you loved Catherine. I did. She was a good woman who tried her best in an impossible situation. Rosa handed Mei Lin a cup. But she never stood up to those men. Never told them they had no right to interfere in her life. She just endured until she couldn't anymore. Mei Lin sipped the tea. It was good, much better than anything she could afford to buy. Is that what killed her? The enduring? Rosa was quiet for a long moment. The fever killed her, but the unhappiness didn't help. She was lonely out here, isolated. Lucas tried to make it better, but he didn't know how, and she didn't know how to tell him what she needed. Rosa looked at Mei Lin directly. You're not like her. You fight. That's good. This life will try to break you if you let it. So you're giving me advice now? I'm telling you what I wish I'd told Catherine. Rosa set down her cup. This house needs someone who isn't afraid to claim space in it. Lucas needs someone who won't just defer to him all the time. The ranch hands need to see that you're here to stay, not just passing through. She paused. And I need to know if I'm working for someone who's going to treat the staff like furniture or like people. Mei Lin looked at this woman who'd been Catherine's housekeeper, who'd probably loved Lucas's first wife, who had every reason to hate the stranger who'd taken her place. I don't know how to be mistress of a house like this. Neither did Catherine when she arrived. But she learned. So will you. Rosa stood. The difference is you already know how to work. Catherine came from money. She'd never had to scrub a floor or mend her own clothes or figure out how to make something from nothing. You have. That'll serve you better than any finishing school. The town doesn't see it that way. The town can go to hell. Rosa's bluntness startled a laugh out of Mei Lin. You're Lucas Hartley's wife. That makes you one of the most powerful women in 3 territories, whether Reed likes it or not. Question is, what are you going to do with that power? Mei Lin had never thought of herself as powerful. The word felt foreign, like clothing that didn't fit. But Rosa was right. Marriage to Lucas had changed her position, whether she was ready for it or not. I don't know yet, she admitted. Fair enough. But figure it out fast. Because Reed meant what he said. He's going to come after you, and he's not going to fight fair. Rosa headed for the door, then paused. One more thing. Lucas hasn't brought a woman to this house since Catherine died. Not for dinner, not for courting, nothing. The fact that he married you, that fast, with that much certainty, that means something. Don't let Reed make you doubt it. She left before Mei Lin could respond. Mei Lin sat with the tea, Rosa's words circling in her head. The staff needed to see she was here to stay. Lucas needed someone who wouldn't just defer to him. The house needed someone who could claim space in it. She'd spent 6 years making herself small, invisible, trying not to take up room in a town that didn't want her. Maybe it was time to try something different. The next morning, Mei Lin came downstairs to find Lucas already gone. Out checking the cattle with Jack, Rosa said. The housekeeper was directing 2 younger women in cleaning the main rooms, her voice sharp but not unkind. Mrs. Hartley, Rosa nodded when she saw Mei Lin. There's breakfast in the kitchen. I can help with the cleaning. All 3 women stopped and stared at her. That's not necessary, Rosa said carefully. We have it handled. I'm sure you do. But I'd like to help anyway. Mei Lin picked up a dustcloth. I'm not good at sitting idle. Rosa's expression shifted into something that might have been approval. Suit yourself. Mary, show Mrs. Hartley how we do the parlor. The morning passed in a blur of dusting and sweeping and learning the rhythms of a house she'd never expected to live in. The 2 younger women, Mary and Beth, both daughters of ranch hands, warmed up once they realized Mei Lin wasn't going to act like she was above manual labor. By lunchtime, they were chatting almost naturally, though they still called her Mrs. Hartley with careful formality. Lucas returned around noon, dusty and tired, and surprised to find his wife on her hands and knees scrubbing the kitchen floor. What are you doing? What does it look like? Mei Lin sat back on her heels. Rosa said the floors needed doing. We have people for that. I know. I'm one of them now. She stood, brushing off her skirt. This is my house too, isn't it? I should know how it works. Lucas looked like he wanted to argue, but Rosa appeared in the doorway with a knowing expression. Lunch is ready, Mr. Hartley. Perhaps you should wash up. He left, shaking his head. But Mei Lin caught the hint of a smile. The afternoon brought a visitor neither of them expected. Sarah appeared on horseback, her face tight with worry. Thank God you're here, she said, practically falling off her horse. May, you need to come back to town, now. What happened? The council's called a meeting, tonight. They're bringing in someone from the territorial government, an investigator. They're claiming your marriage to Lucas violates some kind of statute about coercion and undue influence. Sarah grabbed her hands. They're trying to annul it. The bottom dropped out of Mei Lin's stomach. They can't do that. They're trying. Reed's been talking to everyone, spreading rumors that Lucas forced you into this marriage, that you were in such a desperate situation you couldn't give proper consent. He's making it sound like Lucas took advantage of you. That's not what happened. I know that, but Reed's good at twisting things, and he's got people convinced that you need protecting from Lucas, not from them. Sarah's voice dropped. You have to come to this meeting. You have to tell them the truth. If you don't show up, they'll use your absence as proof that Lucas is controlling you. Lucas had come outside, drawn by the commotion. Sarah's right. They're going to spin this however they want unless we confront it directly. So we go to town and tell them the truth, Mei Lin said, that we chose this, both of us. It won't be that simple. Lucas's expression was grim. Reed will have prepared. He'll have testimony, probably coached witnesses. This is going to be ugly. Then we better get ready. Mei Lin looked at Sarah. What time is the meeting? 7. At the town hall. 3 hours. 3 hours to prepare for a battle that would determine whether her marriage was real or a fiction, whether her choice mattered or could be overridden by men who thought they knew better. Mei Lin went upstairs to change, her hands shaking as she buttoned her dress. She could hear Lucas and Sarah talking in low voices downstairs, planning strategy like generals preparing for war. The blue dress from the ball hung in her wardrobe, still beautiful, still carrying the memory of that night when everything changed. Mei Lin touched the silk, remembering Lucas writing his name on every line of her dance card, remembering the moment she'd decided to be seen. She'd fought too hard to be visible to let Thomas Reed erase her now. When she came back downstairs, Lucas was strapping on a gun belt. She must have made a sound because he looked up, his expression somewhere between apologetic and determined. Just a precaution. You think it's going to get violent? I think Reed is desperate, and desperate men do stupid things. He checked the gun, then holstered it. I'm not taking chances with your safety. The ride into town was tense and silent. Sarah rode beside them, her husband James meeting them at the edge of Redemption Creek with news that the town hall was already filling up. Everyone wanted to see what would happen when Lucas Hartley and his controversial bride faced down the council. The building was packed, every seat taken, people standing along the walls, the air thick with anticipation and judgment. Mei Lin felt every eye on her as she walked in with Lucas, felt the weight of their stares and whispers pressing down like a physical thing. The council sat at a long table at the front of the room. Reed, Morrison, Williams, and Blackwell, plus 2 men Mei Lin didn't recognize. One was introduced as Harold Fletcher, the territorial representative. The other was simply called Mr. Yates, an investigator brought in to examine the circumstances of the marriage. Reed stood as Lucas and Mei Lin took seats in the front row. Thank you all for coming. We're here tonight to address serious concerns about a marriage that took place yesterday under questionable circumstances. There was nothing questionable about it, Lucas said. We had a license, a judge presiding, legal witnesses. The legality isn't in question, Yates said. His voice was dry, academic, like he was examining an interesting specimen rather than 2 people's lives. What we're investigating is whether the marriage was entered into freely or whether coercion, undue influence, or duress played a role. I wasn't coerced, Mei Lin said. With respect, Mrs. Hartley, you may not be the best judge of that. Yates pulled out a notebook. Let's establish the timeline. You met Mr. Hartley at the Harvest Ball 2 nights ago, correct? We'd seen each other before in town. But never spoken? Not more than a greeting. And at this ball, Mr. Hartley danced with you multiple times. 7 times, Mei Lin said. He filled my entire dance card. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Yates made a note. And the next day you were married. Yes. Less than 24 hours after your first real conversation. When you put it like that, it sounds crazy, Lucas interjected, but you're leaving out context. Then provide it, Fletcher said. Help us understand why a respected rancher would rush into marriage with a woman he didn't know. The phrasing was careful, polite, but the implication underneath was clear. Mei Lin felt it like a slap. Because Thomas Reed and this council tried to force her into marrying Albert Monroe, Lucas said flatly. They used her vulnerable position as leverage. They threatened her housing, her livelihood, everything she'd built. We married because it was the only way to get Reed and his friends to back off. So you admit the marriage was motivated by convenience rather than affection, Yates said. I admit we had practical reasons. That doesn't make it coerced, doesn't it? Reed leaned forward. Mr. Hartley, you own half this territory. You have wealth, power, influence. Miss Chen, Mrs. Hartley, was a seamstress living in a rented room, facing eviction and unemployment. The power imbalance alone raises questions about her ability to consent freely. I consented freely, Mei Lin said, her voice rising. Nobody forced me to marry Lucas. But you were facing pressure from this council to marry someone else, Yates pointed out. One could argue you were fleeing one forced marriage directly into another. One could argue that, Mei Lin agreed, if one was determined to see me as a victim who couldn't make her own choices. But I chose Lucas, not because I was desperate or coerced, but because I wanted to. Because he offered me partnership instead of servitude. Because he saw me as a person instead of a problem to be solved. That's a lovely sentiment, Fletcher said. But the question remains, did you have any real alternative? The question hung in the air. Because the truth was, Mei Lin hadn't. The council had made sure of that. They'd backed her into a corner, and Lucas had offered the only escape route available. But saying that out loud would give Reed exactly what he wanted. I had a choice, Mei Lin said carefully. Maybe not a good one. Maybe not the choice I would have wanted under different circumstances, but it was still mine to make. Was it? Pastor Williams looked genuinely troubled. Mrs. Hartley, I don't doubt your sincerity, but sometimes people in desperate situations convince themselves they're choosing freely when they're actually just picking the least terrible option available. Then every marriage made under pressure would be invalid, Lucas said. Every couple who married for money or property or because their families arranged it. Every widow who remarried to survive. You're setting an impossible standard. We're trying to protect a vulnerable woman, Reed said. You're trying to punish us for embarrassing you, Lucas shot back. This has nothing to do with protecting May and everything to do with you being angry that we found a way around your control. The room erupted into arguments, voices rising, people taking sides, the whole thing devolving into chaos until Judge Morrison slammed his gavel down. Order! We will have order! The room quieted slowly. Yates consulted his notes, then looked at Mei Lin directly. Mrs. Hartley, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Do you love Lucas Hartley? The question cut through everything else. Mei Lin felt every eye in the room on her, waiting for her answer. Beside her, Lucas had gone very still. She could lie, could say yes and try to make it convincing. But these people were looking for any excuse to call her a liar, any crack in her story they could exploit. I barely know him, she said quietly. We've had maybe 6 real conversations. I don't know his favorite food or what he does on Sunday mornings or what keeps him up at night. I don't know if I love him. Reed's smile was triumphant. There. You see? But I respect him, Mei Lin continued, her voice strengthening. I respect that he offered me a choice when everyone else was trying to take my choices away. I respect that he stood up to this council when they tried to bully me. I respect that he asked what I wanted instead of deciding for me. She looked at Lucas. I don't know if that's love, but it's real. And it's more than most marriages in this room started with. Lucas reached over and took her hand. The gesture was simple, but something in it made Mei Lin's throat tight. We're building something, Lucas said. We don't know exactly what yet, but it's ours. And we deserve the chance to figure it out without interference from people who've already decided we've failed. Yates was writing furiously in his notebook. Fletcher looked thoughtful. The crowd was murmuring again, but the tone had shifted, less certain, more divided. Then Thomas Reed played his final card. I have witnesses, he announced, people who will testify to Mr. Hartley's inappropriate behavior toward Mrs. Hartley, to the speed of his pursuit, to his use of his position to manipulate a vulnerable woman. Name them, Lucas demanded. Albert Monroe, who was prepared to offer Mrs. Hartley an honorable marriage until you interfered. Albert Monroe stood from the back of the room, his expression sanctimonious. Mr. Hartley knew I'd made an offer. He deliberately undermined it out of some misguided sense of, I don't know, possession. I undermined it because May didn't want to marry you, Lucas said flatly. Did she tell you that, or did you assume? Monroe looked at Mei Lin with an expression that made her skin crawl. Mrs. Hartley, if you'd been given a real choice, proper time to consider, no pressure from Mr. Hartley's wealth and status, would you have chosen differently? It was a trap. If she said no, it proved Lucas had coerced her. If she said yes, it proved she'd been pressured into accepting Monroe. Mei Lin stood, her heart hammering. Mr. Monroe, there is no universe in which I would have chosen to marry you. Not yesterday, not today, not if you were the last man in the territory. You saw me as free labor and childcare. Lucas saw me as a person. That's the difference. Monroe's face flushed red. This is exactly the kind of defiance I'm talking about. The kind of attitude that proves that I have a spine? Mei Lin's voice rang through the hall. That I won't be bought or sold or forced into servitude? You're right. Lucas didn't cure me of that. He encouraged it. The room was dead silent. Fletcher cleared his throat. Are there other witnesses, Mr. Reed? Reed looked like he'd swallowed something bitter, but he nodded. Mrs. Pemberton. Who can attest to Mrs. Hartley's situation before the marriage? Mrs. Pemberton stood, looking uncomfortable but determined. I came to Mrs. Hartley yesterday morning to inform her of the council's decision regarding her housing and employment. She seemed distressed. Of course she was distressed, Sarah called from the back. You were threatening to make her homeless. I was offering her a solution, Mrs. Pemberton said primly, a respectable marriage to a respectable man. And when she refused? Sarah stood, her voice clear and strong. You told her she'd lose her home and her work. You told her she had no choice. I was there, Mrs. Pemberton. I heard everything. Yates made another note. So the council did present the marriage to Mr. Monroe as an ultimatum. We presented it as an option, Reed said quickly, along with the natural consequences of her refusal. Natural consequences, Lucas repeated. You mean the consequences you engineered, the customers you convinced to cancel their orders, the landlord you pressured to end her lease. Those natural consequences? We were acting in the community's best interest. You were acting in your own interests. Lucas stood, and even though he wasn't a particularly tall man, he seemed to fill the room. You wanted to punish Mei Lin for dancing with me, for making you look foolish in front of the town. So you manufactured a crisis that forced her hand. Then when she found another way out, you claimed she was being coerced. His voice dropped to something dangerous. If anyone coerced anyone here, it was you coercing her. We just gave her another option. The crowd was murmuring louder now, the tide shifting. Mei Lin could see it in people's faces, the ones who'd been certain this was a scandal starting to question Reed's narrative. I think we've heard enough, Fletcher said. Mr. Yates and I will need time to review everything and make a determination. This meeting is adjourned. Wait, Mei Lin said. I have something to say. Fletcher looked surprised but nodded. Go ahead, Mrs. Hartley. Mei Lin turned to face the crowd. All these people who'd watched her struggle for 6 years without offering a hand. All these people who'd made her invisible until she did something they couldn't ignore. I came to Redemption Creek with nothing, she said. I built a business with my own hands. I survived in a town that didn't want me by working harder and longer than anyone else. I never asked for special treatment, never demanded to be included in your social circles. I just tried to exist. Her voice strengthened. But existing wasn't enough for you. The moment I dared to be seen, the moment Lucas Hartley wrote his name on my dance card, you decided I'd crossed a line, that I'd gotten above myself. So you tried to put me back in my place. She looked at Thomas Reed. But my place isn't wherever you decide it should be. My place is wherever I choose to stand. And I choose to stand beside my husband. Not because he rescued me. Not because I had no other options. But because he offered me something none of you ever did. Respect. The words echoed in the sudden silence. Mei Lin felt exposed, raw, like she'd stripped herself bare in front of everyone. But she also felt something else. Free. She turned to Lucas and found him looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe. Or something deeper. We're done here, Lucas said to Fletcher and Yates. You want to investigate? Fine. Investigate. Talk to whoever you want. Look at whatever records you need, but you'll find the same thing. 2 people who made a choice together. That's all this is. He took Mei Lin's hand and walked her through the crowd toward the exit. People parted for them, silent now, watching them leave. Behind them, Thomas Reed's voice rang out. This isn't over, Hartley. Lucas didn't even look back. Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet. They rode home through the dark, neither speaking until the ranch lights came into view. Then Lucas pulled his horse to a stop, forcing Mei Lin to do the same. What you said in there, he started, then stopped. About respect. I meant it. I know. That's what... He took a breath. That's what I'm trying to say. You were incredible. The way you stood up to Reed, the way you took control of that whole room, you didn't need me to defend you. You defended yourself. Mei Lin felt something warm bloom in her chest. You helped. Maybe. But mostly I just watched you prove everyone wrong about who you are. Lucas reached over and took her hand. I meant what I said too, about not knowing what this marriage is yet. But I want to find out. Really find out. Not because we're stuck with each other, but because I think we could build something real. Even with the whole town trying to tear us apart, especially then. His smile was small but genuine. Besides, You heard Reed. This isn't over, which means we're going to be fighting side by side for a while. Might as well get to know each other in the process. Mei Lin laughed despite everything. That's the most unromantic thing I've ever heard. Yeah, well, I warned you I'm not good at this. But he was still smiling. Come on, let's go home. The word hung between them, heavy with possibility. Home. Maybe, Mei Lin thought, it could be. Maybe this strange arrangement could become something real. Maybe two people who barely knew each other could figure out how to build a life together despite the world working against them. Or maybe it would fall apart spectacularly. Either way, it was theirs to discover. They rode the last stretch to the house in comfortable silence, and when they arrived, Rosa was waiting with hot food and knowing looks. The household had heard about the meeting, news traveled fast, and everyone seemed to be waiting to see how their new mistress would handle the aftermath. Mei Lin handled it by rolling up her sleeves and helping clean up from dinner, earning startled looks from the staff and another small smile from Lucas. Later, standing in her room with the door open and Lucas's room visible across the hall, Mei Lin felt the full weight of everything crash over her. The meeting. Reed's accusations, her own declaration in front of the whole town. She'd made herself a target tonight, painted herself as someone who wouldn't back down, wouldn't be quiet, wouldn't disappear. There would be consequences for that. But as she looked at the life she was building, messy and uncertain and nothing like what she'd imagined, Mei Lin found she didn't regret it. She was done being invisible. Whatever came next, she'd face it standing tall. The investigation became Mei Lin's shadow, following her through the next 2 weeks like something she couldn't shake. Yates and Fletcher interviewed half the town, collecting testimonies and examining records, building a case for or against the marriage that held Mei Lin's entire future in its balance. Every time she went into Redemption Creek, she felt eyes tracking her movements, heard whispers that stopped when she got too close. Lucas threw himself into gathering evidence of their own. He brought in his lawyer from Denver, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Morris who wore expensive suits and spoke in clipped sentences that brooked no argument. Morris spent 3 days at the ranch, interviewing Mei Lin and Lucas separately, building a timeline, preparing for whatever Fletcher and Yates might conclude. They're going to look for inconsistencies, Morris said during one session. Any detail that suggests coercion or fraud. So I need you to be completely honest with me. Was there any point where you felt you couldn't say no to Lucas? Mei Lin thought about Mrs. Pemberton's ultimatum, about the rocks through her window, about standing in her small room, knowing she was about to lose everything. I felt like I couldn't say no to the situation, she said carefully. But Lucas himself, no. He gave me a choice, a real one. Morris made notes. And the speed of the marriage? How do you explain that? Desperation, practicality, pick whichever sounds better. Mei Lin met the lawyer's eyes. We had reasons. Maybe not romantic ones, but they were real. Romance isn't required for a legal marriage, Morris said. But affection helps. It makes the narrative more convincing. So I need to know, do you have any feelings for Lucas beyond gratitude? The question caught Mei Lin off guard. She thought about Lucas teaching her to ride his horse yesterday, patient when she struggled with the reins. Thought about him asking her opinion on ranch business like it mattered. Thought about the way he'd looked at her after the town hall meeting, like she'd done something brave instead of just defending herself. I like him, she said finally. I respect him. I enjoy his company. Is that enough? It'll have to be. Morris closed her notebook. Because Reed is building a case that paints you as a victim and Lucas as a predator. We need to counter that with evidence of genuine partnership. Partnership. The word Lucas had used from the beginning, Mei Lin held on to it like a lifeline. The next morning brought unexpected news. Sarah arrived at the ranch with James, both of them looking grim. Reed's making moves, James said without preamble. He's calling in political favors, trying to get someone from the territorial legislature involved. If he succeeds, this stops being a local investigation and becomes something much bigger. Lucas swore under his breath. He really wants to destroy this marriage, doesn't he? He wants to destroy you, James corrected. The marriage is just the weapon he's using. You've been a thorn in his side for years, blocking his land deals, refusing to support his political ambitions. This is his chance to take you down. By ruining May's reputation in the process, Lucas said bitterly. I'm standing right here, Mei Lin interjected, and I can handle Reed. Sarah grabbed her hands. May, this isn't just about Reed anymore. If the legislature gets involved, they could invalidate the marriage, force an annulment, even bring criminal charges against Lucas for fraud or coercion. Based on what evidence? We haven't done anything wrong. Evidence doesn't always matter when powerful people want a specific outcome. James looked troubled. I've been asking around. Reed's been talking to representatives, planning stories about Lucas taking advantage of a vulnerable immigrant woman. He's making this about more than just your marriage. He's making it about protecting all the vulnerable women in the territory from men who might exploit them. That's insane, Lucas said. I didn't exploit anyone. I know that. You know that. But Reed's good at spinning narratives, and he's got people listening. James pulled out a newspaper from his jacket. This ran yesterday in Denver. The headline made Maylin's stomach turn. Rancher's hasty marriage raises questions about immigrant protections. The article was carefully worded, never quite accusing Lucas of anything specific, but implying everything. It painted Maylin as a helpless woman trapped by circumstances, Lucas as a wealthy landowner who'd taken advantage, the marriage as a cautionary tale about the need for stricter oversight. Who wrote this? Lucas demanded. The byline says J. Patterson, but I have it on good authority. Reed fed him the story. James took the paper back. It's already being picked up by other papers. This is going regional, Lucas. Maybe territorial. Maylin felt like the ground was shifting under her feet. She'd thought the town hall meeting was the worst of it, that standing up to Reed publicly would be enough. But he just changed tactics, weaponizing her story to serve a bigger agenda she'd never signed up for. We need to fight back, she said. Morris, who'd been listening from the doorway, stepped forward. Fighting back in the press rarely works. It just keeps the story alive. What we need is to end the investigation in our favor, quickly, before Reed can escalate further. How? Lucas asked. By giving Fletcher and Yates what they want, proof that this marriage is real, not just legal, but genuine. Morris looked between them. They need to see that you two are building an actual partnership, that you know each other, care about each other, function as a married couple. We barely know each other, Maylin said. Then get to know each other. Fast! Morris's voice was sharp. Because in 3 days, Yates and Fletcher are coming here to conduct their final interviews. And if they walk away unconvinced that this marriage is legitimate, Reed wins. After Morris left, Maylin found herself alone with Lucas in his study. He was staring at the newspaper article, his expression unreadable. I'm sorry, he said without looking up. For what? For all of this. For dragging you into my fight with Reed, for not anticipating how far he'd go. Lucas finally met her eyes. You were right that first night. I didn't know what I was starting. Maylin sat in the chair across from his desk. Neither did I, but we're in it now. We could still end it. Get the annulment Reed wants. You could... Could what? Go back to my old life? It's gone, Lucas. Reed made sure of that. Even if we ended this marriage, I'd still be the woman who tried to climb above her station. The cautionary tale. The immigrant who got too ambitious. She leaned forward. At least this way, I'm fighting. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. Morris is right. We need to actually get to know each other. If Yates asks me what your favorite food is or how you take your coffee, I should be able to answer. I don't drink coffee, only tea. Green tea, if available. See, I didn't know that. Lucas grabbed paper and a pen. What else don't I know? It felt absurd at first, sitting in his study trading basic facts like strangers on a train. Maylin learned that Lucas hated mornings but loved thunderstorms, that he'd broken his arm twice as a kid, that his favorite meal was Rosa's pot roast, which his mother used to make before she died when he was 16. Lucas learned that Maylin had taught herself to read English by studying discarded newspapers, that she was terrible at singing but loved music anyway, that she'd wanted to be a doctor before her mother got sick and the money for any kind of education disappeared. A doctor? Lucas looked genuinely surprised. My mother used to say I had steady hands and a good memory, that I could help people. Maylin shrugged. But that was a different life, a different version of me. Maybe not so different. Lucas set down his pen. You're still helping people through your sewing, just differently than you planned. It's not the same. Maybe not. But it's still worth something. He paused. When this is over, when Reed backs off and the investigation ends, What do you want to do? With the sewing, I mean. Do you want to keep doing it? The question caught Mei Lin off guard. No one had ever asked her what she wanted to do, only what she could do. I don't know, she admitted. I never thought I'd have a choice. You have a choice now. Lucas's voice was gentle. Whatever you want to do, we can make it work. If you want to expand the business, hire help, even open a proper shop in town, I'll support it. If you want to stop entirely and try something else, that's fine too. This is your life, Mei Lin. Not just my life that you're living in. The words settled into something tender in her chest. You mean that? Of course I mean it. Why would I lie? Not lie, just say what you think I want to hear. Lucas leaned back in his chair. I'm not good at that. Ask anyone who's tried to negotiate with me. I tend to say exactly what I mean, even when I probably shouldn't. He smiled slightly. It's gotten me in trouble more times than I can count. Like proposing to a woman you barely knew? Exactly like that. His smile widened, though I'm starting to think that might work out. Mei Lin felt herself smile back. We'll see. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking, not interrogating each other for facts, but actually talking. Lucas told her about the ranch, about the years he'd spent building it from something modest into what it was now, about the mistakes he'd made with Catherine, the ways he'd failed to see her unhappiness until it was too late. Mei Lin told him about leaving San Francisco after her mother died, about the journey to Redemption Creek and the early months when she'd nearly starved because no one would hire her, about the first dress she'd made for Mrs. Morrison, how her hands had shaken so badly she'd had to redo every seam twice. Why did you stay? Lucas asked. After it became clear the town didn't want you here, where else would I go? And besides, Mei Lin looked out the window at the valley spreading below them. I'm stubborn. The more people told me to leave, the more determined I became to stay. I understand that. Lucas stood and walked to the window beside her. I almost sold this place after Catherine died. Everyone said I should. Too many memories, too much land for one person. But I couldn't let it go. Couldn't let her death mean that everything we'd tried to build just disappeared? Do you still think about her? Every day. Lucas's voice was quiet. Not the way I did at first when it felt like I was drowning in it. But she's still there. Part of the fabric of this place. Part of me. He glanced at Mei Lin. Does that bother you? No? And Mei Lin realized she meant it. She was your wife. She helped build this ranch. Of course she's still here. I'd be more worried if you just erased her completely. Some people think I should have. That keeping her things, talking about her, it's morbid. People think a lot of things that are wrong. Mei Lin turned to face him. You loved her. That doesn't just stop because she's gone, and it doesn't mean you can't build something new with someone else. Lucas looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone more tentative, uncertain. Instead, you're... He stopped, searching for words. You're solid, clear about who you are and what you want. Even when you don't have all the answers, you're honest about it. Is that a compliment? It's the truth. Lucas reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture surprisingly intimate. Which is the best kind of compliment, I think. Mei Lin's breath caught. They were standing close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could smell the scent of leather and wood smoke that clung to his clothes. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. Then Rosa's voice echoed from downstairs. Mr. Hartley, you have visitors. The moment broke. Lucas stepped back, looking almost relieved. We should probably see who that is. The visitors turned out to be Yates and Fletcher, arriving 3 days early and unannounced. We thought a surprise visit might be more illuminating, Fletcher said with a pleasant smile that didn't reach his eyes. See how you two actually live when you're not prepared for scrutiny. Lucas's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. Of course, come in. The next hour was excruciating. Yates and Fletcher walked through the house, noting which room Mei Lin slept in, asking pointed questions about her possessions and where they were kept. They interviewed Rosa separately, then Jack, then the ranch hands. They examined the marriage license again, cross-referenced signatures, looked for any detail that might suggest fraud. Through it all, Mei Lin felt like a specimen being examined under glass. Every answer she gave was weighed and analyzed. Every glance she exchanged with Lucas was noted. Finally, they gathered in the parlor. Fletcher looked at his notes while Yates watched them with those dry, academic eyes. "We've completed our preliminary investigation," Fletcher said, "and we have some questions." "Ask them," Lucas said. "Mrs. Hartley, can you tell us why you married Lucas?" Maylin had prepared for this question, rehearsed answers with Morris that sounded convincing without being false. But sitting there with Fletcher's eyes on her, all the practiced words evaporated. "Because he offered me respect," she said. "Because he saw me as a person instead of a problem. Because when the town tried to force me into a marriage I didn't want, he gave me another option." She paused. "And because I was tired of being invisible." "That's not love," Yates observed. "No, it's not, but it's honest." Maylin met his gaze steadily. "I won't sit here and claim this was some grand romance. We got married fast for practical reasons. But that doesn't make it fake. People marry for practical reasons all the time. The difference is, we're being honest about it." Fletcher made a note. "Mr. Hartley, do you love your wife?" The question hung in the air. Maylin found herself holding her breath, wondering what Lucas would say. "I respect her," Lucas said finally. "I admire her. I enjoy her company, and I'm learning to know her better every day." "Is that love?" "I don't know. Ask me again in 6 months." He leaned forward. "But I'll tell you what it's not. It's not coercion. It's not fraud. It's not some scheme to take advantage of a vulnerable woman. It's two people trying to build something real in the middle of a situation neither of us chose." "And the speed of the marriage?" Fletcher pressed. "You must admit, less than 48 hours from first meeting to wedding, it raises questions." "It raises questions because Thomas Reed wanted it to," Lucas said flatly. "He manufactured a crisis specifically to force May into marriage with Albert Monroe. We countered his move with one of our own. That's all this is. Two different groups trying to control the same situation. Except Mr. Reed claims he was acting in Mrs. Hartley's best interests." "Mr. Reed was acting in his own interests," Maylin interjected. "He wanted to punish me for dancing with Lucas, for daring to be visible when I was supposed to stay in the background. The marriage to Monroe was never about helping me. It was about putting me in my place." Yates consulted his notebook. "We've interviewed several townspeople who corroborate that the council did pressure you to marry Mr. Monroe. However, we've also heard testimony suggesting that Mr. Hartley's proposal came with its own form of pressure. That you were in such a desperate situation, you couldn't refuse him even if you'd wanted to." "That's Reed's narrative," Lucas said, "not the truth." "Is there a difference?" Fletcher asked. "If Mrs. Hartley was facing homelessness and unemployment, and you offered her security in exchange for marriage, how is that any different from coercion?" "Because I asked her," Lucas said. "I presented an option and let her decide. Reed presented an ultimatum and told her it was her only choice. That's the difference." Fletcher looked at Maylin. "Is that accurate?" Maylin thought about that moment in her small room when Lucas had proposed, about the way he'd given her space to refuse, about the certainty in his voice when he'd said she always had a choice. "Lucas gave me a choice," she said. "Maybe it wasn't a perfect choice. Maybe the options weren't ideal. But it was mine to make. Reed didn't give me that. He told me what would happen and expected me to comply." She held Fletcher's gaze. "So, yes, that's accurate." Yates and Fletcher exchanged glances. Some wordless communication passed between them. "We need to discuss our findings," Fletcher said, standing. "We'll send our report to the territorial government within the week." "And then what?" Lucas asked. "And then they'll decide if the marriage stands or if it should be annulled." Fletcher's expression was unreadable. "Thank you for your cooperation." They left in a flurry of final questions and formal goodbyes. The moment their carriage disappeared down the road, Lucas sank onto the sofa and dropped his head into his hands. That was a disaster. "We don't know that," Maylin said, sitting beside him. "Fletcher's tone at the end, he thinks we're lying. Or he's trying to stay neutral." Maylin touched his shoulder. "We told the truth. That has to count for something." Lucas looked up at her. "What if it doesn't? What if they decide Reed is right and annul the marriage anyway?" The question opened up a chasm of fear Maylin had been trying not to look at. If the marriage was annulled, she'd be right back where she started. Except worse. Now she was notorious. The Chinese woman who'd tried to trap Lucas Hartley. The cautionary tale Reed wanted her to be. "Then we fight it," she said more confidently than she felt. "How?" "If the territorial government rules against us, then we appeal. We take it higher. We make so much noise they can't ignore us. Mei Lin grabbed his hand. Lucas, I'm not giving up. Not after everything we've been through. Are you? Lucas looked at their joined hands, then back at her face. Something in his expression softened. No, I'm not giving up. Then we keep fighting. The week that followed was the longest of Mei Lin's life. Every morning she woke expecting news. Every afternoon brought disappointment when no word came. The waiting was corrosive, eating away at her confidence and Lucas's composure both. Moore stayed at the ranch, preparing contingency plans for every possible outcome. Sarah visited almost daily, bringing news from town that was rarely good. Reed was celebrating publicly, telling anyone who would listen that the investigation would vindicate him, that the fraudulent marriage would be dissolved and proper order restored. On the 5th day, Mei Lin was in the kitchen helping Rosa prepare dinner when Jack burst through the door. Boss, you need to see this! Lucas came running from the study. What is it? Jack held up a telegram, his face tight. It's from Reed. He's called another town meeting, tonight. Says he has information about the investigation that everyone needs to hear. Lucas grabbed the telegram and read it, his expression darkening. He knows something. The bastard knows what's in that report before we do. How's that possible? Mei Lin demanded. He's got connections in the territorial government, friends who owe him favors. Lucas crushed the telegram in his fist. If he's calling a meeting, it's because the news is good for him. Or because he's bluffing, Morris said, appearing in the doorway. Trying to force our hand before the official report arrives. Either way, we need to be there. Lucas looked at Mei Lin. Are you up for another fight? Mei Lin thought about the last town meeting, about standing in front of everyone and defending her choices, about Reed's contemptuous expression and the weight of all those judging eyes. She was tired of fighting, tired of having to prove herself worthy of basic respect, but she was more tired of letting Reed win. I'm up for it, she said. The town hall was even more packed than last time. Word had spread that Reed had news about the investigation, and everyone wanted to hear it. Mei Lin walked in with Lucas, her head high despite the whispers that followed them. Sarah and James were already there, saving seats in the front row. Reed stood at the front of the room with the entire council, looking triumphant. The moment he saw Lucas and Mei Lin, his smile widened. Thank you all for coming, he began. I know there's been a lot of speculation about the investigation into Lucas Hartley's marriage. Well, I'm pleased to announce that we've received word from the territorial government. Mei Lin's heart dropped into her stomach. The investigators have completed their review, Reed continued, and while the official report hasn't been released yet, I've been informed of their preliminary findings. He paused for dramatic effect. They've determined that there are sufficient grounds to question the validity of this marriage. The room erupted into gasps and excited chatter. Beside her, Lucas had gone very still. According to my sources, Reed said, raising his voice over the noise, the investigators found evidence of coercion and undue influence. They're recommending that the territorial government initiate annulment proceedings. That's a lie, Lucas said, standing. You can't possibly know what's in that report. Can't I? Reed's smile was vicious. I have friends in high places, Hartley. Friends who believe, as I do, that this marriage was a mockery of our institutions, that you took advantage of a vulnerable woman for your own purposes. I didn't take advantage of anyone, Lucas said. Then why the rush? Why marry someone you barely knew? Reed looked around the room, playing to the crowd. I'll tell you why. Because you knew that given time to think, Mrs. Hartley would realize she was making a mistake. So you pressured her into a hasty decision she couldn't back out of. That's not true, Mei Lin said, standing beside Lucas. Reed barely glanced at her. Mrs. Hartley, I know you feel obligated to defend your husband, but you don't have to anymore. The territorial government is going to free you from this situation. You'll be able to start over, make better choices. Better choices? Mei Lin's voice rang through the hall. You mean choices you approve of? Choices that keep me in my place? I mean choices made without coercion. The only person who coerced me was you. Mei Lin stepped forward, fury burning through her caution. You and your counsel. You threatened my home and my livelihood. You tried to force me into marrying a man I didn't want. And when I found another way, you couldn't stand it. So you manufactured this investigation to punish me for escaping your control. That's not... It is true. Everyone in this room knows it. You're not protecting me. You're not protecting anyone. You're trying to protect your own power, your ability to dictate how people live their lives, and you're using me as a weapon to do it." The room had gone silent. Even Reed seemed momentarily stunned by her vehemence. Then the door opened, and Catherine Morris walked in holding a packet of papers. "Perfect timing," she said, "because I have something everyone needs to hear." Reed's expression shifted from triumph to confusion. "Who are you?" "Catherine Morris, legal counsel for Mr. and Mrs. Hartley, and I have here the official report from Yates and Fletcher, the actual report, not whatever fiction you've been peddling." Reed's face went white. "How did you—" "I have friends in high places too. Mine just happened to be more reliable than yours." Morris opened the packet and pulled out several pages. "Would you like me to read the relevant sections aloud, or would you prefer to retract your lies first?" For a long moment, Reed said nothing. Then Judge Morrison cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should hear what the actual report says." Morris smiled. It wasn't a kind expression. "The report concludes that while the marriage between Lucas Hartley and Mei Lin Chen, now Hartley, occurred under unusual circumstances, there is no evidence of coercion, fraud, or undue influence. Both parties entered the marriage willingly, with full understanding of what they were doing. The investigators found no grounds to recommend annulment. The room erupted again, but this time the energy was different, confused, uncertain. Reed grabbed for the papers. "That's impossible. My source said—" "Your source lied to you." Morris pulled the papers back. "Or you lied about having a source. Either way, the official finding is clear. This marriage is legitimate and will stand." Mei Lin felt Lucas's hand find hers, squeezing tight. The relief that flooded through her was so intense it made her dizzy. They'd won. The territorial government had ruled in their favor. Reed was still sputtering, trying to salvage something from the wreckage of his plan. There must be some mistake. The investigation couldn't possibly have found— But it did. Morris's voice cut through his protests. "It's over, Mr. Reed. You lost. The marriage stands, and any further attempts to interfere will be viewed as harassment." She looked around the room. "I suggest everyone go home and let Mr. and Mrs. Hartley live their lives in peace." People started filing out, their excited chatter filling the air. Some looked disappointed. Others seemed relieved. A few even offered small nods of acknowledgement to Lucas and Mei Lin as they passed. Thomas Reed stood at the front of the room, his triumph turned to ash, looking smaller somehow, diminished. Lucas walked up to him slowly. "It's over, Reed." "This doesn't change anything," Reed said, "but there was no fire in it anymore, just bitterness. You might have won this battle, but nothing." Lucas's voice was quiet but firm. "You came after my wife. You tried to destroy our marriage, our reputations, our lives. And you failed. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave us alone. You're going to stop spreading lies and stirring up trouble. And if you don't, I'll use every bit of influence I have to make sure everyone knows exactly what you did here." "You're threatening me?" "I'm promising you." Lucas leaned closer. "Stay away from my wife. Stay away from my ranch. Stay away from anything that concerns me, or I'll make it my life's work to ensure you regret it." Reed's face went through several expressions before settling on resigned fury. Without another word, he pushed past Lucas and stormed out of the hall. The council members who remained looked uncomfortable. Judge Morrison approached hesitantly. "Lucas, for what it's worth, I never wanted it to go this far." "But you let it happen anyway." Lucas's voice was cold. "You all did. You let Reed use this council to harass a woman who'd done nothing wrong. Don't expect me to forget that." Morrison nodded slowly. "I understand. For what it's worth, Mrs. Hartley, I'm sorry. You deserved better from this town. It wasn't much, but it was something." But outside, the cool evening air felt like absolution. Mei Lin stood on the steps of the town hall, breathing deep, feeling like she'd just survived something that should have killed her. "We won," she said, testing the words. "We won," Lucas confirmed. He looked at her, and his expression was complicated. Relief mixed with exhaustion, mixed with something that might have been pride. "You were incredible in there. The way you stood up to Reed, called him out in front of everyone. I was furious. I couldn't help it." "Good. You should be furious. He tried to destroy you." Lucas took both her hands. "But you didn't let him. You fought back. And you won." The word hit different this time. Not we. You. "We won," Mei Lin corrected gently. Together. Lucas smiled, and it transformed his whole face. Yeah, together. They rode home through the darkness, not talking much, just existing in the relief of it being over. The investigation was done. The marriage would stand. Reed had been defeated, at least for now. When they arrived at the ranch, Rosa met them at the door with rare approval on her face. I heard. Congratulations. News travels fast, Lucas said. Jack rode ahead to tell us. Rosa looked at Mei Lin. Well done, Mrs. Hartley. You've earned your place here. Coming from Rosa, it meant something. That night, Mei Lin stood in her room. Not Catherine's room, not a guest room, but her room now, officially and legally, and looked out at the valley bathed in moonlight. This was her home, her life, her choice. There was a soft knock on her door. Lucas stood in the hallway, looking uncertain. Can I come in? Mei Lin nodded. Lucas entered but didn't sit, just stood near the window with her. I was thinking about what you said in the town hall, about choices. What about it? You've had to make so many choices that weren't really choices, bad options or worse options, survival or disaster. He turned to look at her. I want to give you a real choice now about this marriage, about us. Mei Lin's heart stuttered. What kind of choice? We won the investigation. The marriage is legal and binding, but that doesn't mean we have to stay married if you don't want to. If you'd rather take the victory and move on, start fresh somewhere else, I'll help you, set you up with money, references, whatever you need. His voice was steady, but there was something vulnerable in his eyes. Or you could stay, not because you have to, but because you want to. And we could see if this partnership could become something more. Something more like what? Like a real marriage. Not just a legal arrangement, but a partnership built on, he stopped, searching for words, on actually knowing each other, caring about each other, maybe even loving each other, eventually. Mei Lin's throat felt tight. You're giving me an out. I'm giving you a choice, a real one, with no pressure and no timeline. Whatever you decide, I'll support it. It would be easy to leave. To take the fresh start Lucas was offering and disappear into a life where she wasn't constantly fighting just to exist, where Thomas Reed's hatred and the town's judgment couldn't touch her. But standing in this room, in this house, with this man who'd fought beside her when he could have walked away, Mei Lin realized she didn't want easy. She wanted real. I want to stay, she said. Lucas exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. Yeah, Tuan. Mei Lin stepped closer to him. I want to see what this could become, what we could become. Not because I'm trapped or desperate or out of options, but because I think we could build something good here, if we're brave enough to try. I think we've proven we're pretty brave, Lucas said, and there was something in his voice that made Mei Lin's chest warm. Then let's be brave together, brave. Lucas reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. I'm going to kiss you now, if that's okay. That's okay, Mei Lin whispered. The kiss was gentle and uncertain, two people learning each other in a new way. It wasn't the passionate embrace of a romance novel or the perfect moment of a fairy tale. It was real and slightly awkward and absolutely right. When they pulled apart, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. So we're doing this, he said. Really doing this. Really doing this, Mei Lin confirmed. It's not going to be easy. Reed might have backed off, but there will be others. People who don't approve, who think we're making a mistake. Let them think what they want, Mei Lin smiled. We've already proven them wrong once. We can do it again. Lucas kissed her again, longer this time, and Mei Lin let herself sink into it, into the possibility of this strange marriage becoming something neither of them had planned, but both were choosing. When he finally left, heading back to his own room across the hall, Mei Lin stood at the window again. The valley looked the same as it had an hour ago, but everything felt different. She'd come to Redemption Creek 6 years ago with nothing but skill and determination. She'd survived in a town that didn't want her by making herself small and invisible. Now she was Lucas Hartley's wife, owner of this ranch, this land, this life. And she was done being invisible. Thomas Reed had tried to destroy her and failed. The territorial investigation had tried to prove her marriage fraudulent and found it legitimate. The town had tried to keep her in her place, and she'd refused to stay there. She'd fought for every inch of ground she stood on, and she'd won. Whatever came next, Whether it was building a real marriage with Lucas or facing down the next person who tried to tell her she didn't belong, Maylin knew she could handle it. She'd already proven that strength and courage could rewrite even the harshest story. Now it was time to write the next chapter. The morning after the town hall meeting, Maylin woke to find Lucas already gone and a note on her dresser written in his rough handwriting. Gone to handle ranch business. Back by noon. Help yourself to anything in the house. She smiled at the casual intimacy of it, this assumption that she belonged here, that his home was hers to move through freely. It was such a small thing, but after years of occupying space apologetically, it meant everything. Rosa was in the kitchen when Maylin came down, supervising Mary and Beth as they prepared bread dough. The housekeeper looked up and something in her expression had shifted since yesterday. Not quite warmth, but something closer to acceptance. "Mrs. Hartley, there's coffee if you want it, though I recall you prefer tea." "You remembered. It's my job to remember." But Rosa's tone suggested it was more than that. "There's also mail for you, on the desk in Mr. Hartley's study." Maylin found 3 letters waiting. One from Sarah, full of excited congratulations and relief. One from a woman in Denver she'd never met, asking about her sewing services after reading about her in the newspaper. And one with no return address, sealed with plain wax. She opened the last one carefully and felt her stomach drop as she read. The letter was from Thomas Reed. Not a threat exactly, but close enough. He congratulated her on winning the investigation, then spent 2 pages detailing all the ways her presence in Redemption Creek would continue to make life difficult for Lucas. Business partnerships that would dissolve. Social invitations that would stop coming. Political support that would evaporate. All because Lucas had married someone the town's elite would never accept. "You may have won the battle," Reed wrote in his tight, angry script, "but you'll lose the war. Eventually, Lucas will realize what this marriage has cost him, what you've cost him. And when he does, you'll be exactly where you started, alone and unwanted." Maylin set the letter down with shaking hands. Reed had lost the investigation, but he wasn't done fighting. He was just changing tactics, aiming to destroy Lucas's standing rather than the marriage itself. And maybe he was right. Maybe eventually the cost would be too high. Maybe Lucas would wake up one day and regret everything. Bad news? She turned to find Lucas in the doorway, dusty from the morning's work and looking concerned. "Reed sent a letter. He's threatening to isolate you socially and professionally because of our marriage." Lucas crossed the room and read the letter, his expression darkening. Then he crumpled it and tossed it in the fireplace. "Let him try. Lucas, he could actually do this. You have business relationships that depend on what? The approval of small-minded men who think they get to decide who's acceptable?" Lucas shook his head. "If those relationships can't survive me marrying who I want, they weren't worth much to begin with." "That's easy to say now. But when you start losing contracts, when people stop doing business with you, then I'll find new people to do business with. May, I'm not going to let Reed bully me into regretting this marriage." He took her hands. "Unless you want out. If you're having second thoughts after reading that, I'm not having second thoughts about us." Maylin squeezed his hands. "I'm having doubts about me, about whether I'm worth everything you're going to lose because of this." Lucas's expression softened. "You're not something I'm losing things because of. You're something I gained. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, you've traded a comfortable life for constant fighting. My life wasn't comfortable. It was empty." Lucas pulled her closer. "You want to know what I've gained? I wake up every morning and there's someone else in this house who actually lives here instead of just existing. Someone who challenges me and argues with me and doesn't let me hide in my work. Someone who makes me want to be better than I was yesterday." He paused. "That's worth a few lost business contracts." Maylin wanted to believe him, but Reed's words kept echoing in her head, poisoning her relief from the night before. The next week proved Reed hadn't been bluffing. 3 of Lucas's long-standing business partners sent letters terminating their agreements. The bank suddenly needed additional collateral for a loan that had been routine for years. Invitations to social events that Lucas normally ignored stopped coming. Not that he cared, but the pointed exclusion was clear. And the whispers started again. Different than before, more insidious. People congratulated Lucas on winning the investigation while making it clear they thought he'd won a poisoned victory. His reputation was being slowly dismantled, one conversation at a time. Lucas handled it with grim determination, finding new partners and refusing to acknowledge the social snubs. But Maylin could see the strain it put on him, even when he tried to hide it. Sarah noticed it too during one of her visits. He's losing ground in town. Reed's been systematic about it, talking to the right people, planting the right doubts. If this keeps up, Lucas's influence is going to erode completely. What am I supposed to do? Maylin asked. The investigation cleared us. We proved the marriage was legitimate. I can't make people accept me. Maybe you don't need to make them accept you. Maybe you need to make them need you. Sarah's eyes were bright with an idea that was probably dangerous. You're good at sewing, right? Better than anyone in 3 territories? I don't see how that helps Lucas's business reputation. It doesn't, but it builds yours. Sarah leaned forward. Right now, you're just Lucas Hartley's controversial wife. But what if you were also the territory's best dressmaker? What if women came from Denver and beyond because you're the only one who can do what you do? Sarah, and think about it. Reed's attacking Lucas through social channels, but social channels are controlled by women, and women need dresses. If you became someone they couldn't afford to exclude, they'd still exclude me, out of principle. Would they, though? When their daughters need wedding dresses and you're the only one who can make them look like they stepped out of a fashion magazine. Sarah grabbed her hands. May, you've been hiding your talent for years because you were trying to survive, but you don't have to hide anymore. Use what you're good at. Build something that makes you indispensable. The idea was both terrifying and appealing. Maylin had spent so long making herself small that the thought of deliberately drawing attention felt wrong. But Sarah had a point. Right now she was just Lucas's wife, defined entirely by her relationship to him. Building her own reputation might shift that dynamic. I wouldn't even know where to start, she said. Start with the woman who wrote you from Denver, the one asking about your services. Sarah's smile was fierce. Make her something so beautiful she tells everyone she knows. Build from there. That night, Maylin mentioned the idea to Lucas over dinner. He listened carefully, then set down his fork. You want to expand your sewing business? Maybe. I don't know. Sarah thinks it could help with the social situation. Forget the social situation. Do you want to do this? Lucas's voice was intent. Not because it might help me, but because it's something you'd enjoy. Maylin thought about it honestly. She'd loved sewing once, before it became purely about survival. Loved the precision of it, the way fabric could be transformed into something beautiful. But she'd lost that joy somewhere along the way, buried under years of just trying to make enough money to eat. I think I could, she said. If I didn't have to worry about whether each dress would be enough to pay rent. If I could actually choose my clients and my projects instead of taking whatever work came. Then do it. Lucas's decision was immediate. We'll set you up a proper workroom. Buy whatever equipment and materials you need. You can hire help if you want it. Lucas, that's expensive, and it's an investment. In you. In something you're good at and might actually enjoy. He reached across the table and took her hand. Besides, if you're going to be stuck married to me, you should at least get to do work that doesn't make you miserable. Maylin felt something warm bloom in her chest. I'm not stuck. No? Lucas smiled. How would you describe it then? Choosing to stay. Maylin smiled back. Every day. The workroom Lucas set up for her was nothing like the cramped corner of her old rented room. He cleared out an entire ground floor space with enormous windows for natural light, bought a professional sewing machine from San Francisco, installed shelves for fabric and supplies. Within 2 weeks, Maylin had a proper studio that would have been unthinkable a month ago. She wrote back to the Denver client, offering to create a custom dress. The woman, Mrs. Catherine Chen, no relation but the shared surname felt auspicious, responded enthusiastically, sending measurements and a substantial deposit that made Maylin's hand shake when she opened the envelope. The dress took 3 weeks to complete. Maylin poured everything she'd learned and every technique she'd been too cautious to try when money was tight into making it perfect. Deep burgundy silk with intricate embroidery along the bodice, a cut that was fashion-forward without being scandalous. When she shipped it to Denver, she included a small card with her name and a line that made her nervous. Custom designs by Maylin Hartley, not hiding behind anonymity, not downplaying her work, claiming it. Catherine Chen's response came a week later. She loved the dress. She'd worn it to a party where 3 other women had demanded to know where she'd gotten it. Could Mei Lin handle 3 more commissions? Mei Lin could. Within a month, she had a waiting list. Women from Denver, from Colorado Springs, even one from as far as Santa Fe. They didn't care that she was Chinese or that she'd married Lucas Hartley under controversial circumstances. They cared that she could make them look like someone important. Sarah had been right. Money and talent opened doors that social acceptance never could. The change in Redemption Creek's attitude was subtle, but real. Women who'd cut Mei Lin at social events suddenly found reasons to visit the ranch, ostensibly to see Rosa or discuss community matters, but always managing to peek into the workroom and ask casual questions about Mei Lin's services. Mrs. Pemberton was among them, arriving one afternoon with an expression that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. "Mrs. Hartley, I hope I'm not interrupting." Mei Lin looked up from the dress she was hemming. "Mrs. Pemberton, what can I do for you?" The older woman's mouth tightened at the casual tone, but she pushed forward. "I've heard you're taking commissions for custom dresses." "I am, though I have a substantial waiting list at the moment." "I see." Mrs. Pemberton looked around the workroom with barely concealed envy. "My daughter is getting married in 6 months. She's seen some of your work and has her heart set on you making her wedding dress." Mei Lin set down her needle carefully. This was Margaret Fletcher's mother, one of the women who'd whispered and laughed behind her hand at the harvest ball, who'd supported the council's attempts to force her into marrying Albert Monroe. "I'm honored," Mei Lin said, keeping her voice neutral, "but as I mentioned, my schedule is quite full. I'm prepared to pay a premium, whatever you require." "It's not about money, Mrs. Pemberton. It's about time and capacity." Mei Lin met her eyes steadily. "I only take on projects I can give proper attention to. I wouldn't want to disappoint your daughter." The subtext was clear. Mei Lin didn't need this commission badly enough to accept abuse along with it. Mrs. Pemberton's expression shifted through several emotions before settling on something almost like respect. "I understand I haven't been welcoming to you, that the council's actions were perhaps more aggressive than necessary." "Perhaps?" Mei Lin kept her voice even. "All right, they were wrong. We were wrong." The admission clearly cost her. "You didn't deserve to be treated that way, and I'm sorry for my part in it. It wasn't much, but it was more than Mei Lin had expected to ever hear from this woman." "I appreciate the apology," Mei Lin said carefully, "and I'll consider your daughter's request. I'll need to see my current schedule and determine if I can fit in a project of that size." "Of course. Thank you." Mrs. Pemberton hesitated at the door. "Your work truly is exceptional." Margaret was right about that. After she left, Mei Lin sat with the half-finished dress in her lap, feeling oddly shaken. She'd spent so long being invisible that having power, real power, the kind that made women like Mrs. Pemberton apologize, felt foreign. Lucas found her there an hour later, still sitting with the same dress untouched. "You all right?" Mrs. Pemberton came by. She apologized. "Kind of." Mei Lin looked up at him. "She wants me to make her daughter's wedding dress." Lucas sat beside her. "How do you feel about that?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to tell her to go to hell, but part of me—" Mei Lin trailed off. "Part of you wants to prove you're better than the grudges they hold," Lucas finished. "Is that weak?" "It's human." Lucas took the dress from her lap and set it aside, pulling her into his arms. "You get to decide, Mei Lin. You can tell her no, and it's completely justified. Or you can take the commission and show her what she almost destroyed. Either way, I support you." Mei Lin leaned into him, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and hay and home. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I just know you." His arms tightened around her. "And I know you're strong enough to handle whatever you choose." In the end, Mei Lin took the commission. Not because she'd forgiven Mrs. Pemberton, but because she wanted to show the town that she was here to stay. That their attempts to erase her had failed so completely that now they needed her. The wedding dress became her masterpiece. She poured months of work into it, creating something so beautiful that when Margaret Fletcher saw it for the first time, she burst into tears. "It's perfect," Margaret whispered, touching the silk like it might disappear. "More perfect than anything I imagined." Her wedding was a major social event, and Mei Lin's dress was the talk of it. Women who'd snubbed her for months suddenly remembered they'd always admired her work. Men who'd sided with Reed found their wives insisting they be civil to Mrs. Hartley. It wasn't acceptance, not really, but it was acknowledgement. A recognition that Maylin had carved out a place in their world, whether they wanted her there or not. Lucas watched it all with quiet satisfaction. His business had stabilized too, new partners replacing the ones Reed had poisoned, respect earned through consistent quality rather than social maneuvering. He'd learned to operate outside the circles that had rejected him, and found them less necessary than he'd thought. 6 months after the investigation ended, Reed's influence had diminished noticeably. Without the marriage to attack, he'd lost his rallying point. His attempts to isolate Lucas had backfired, revealing Reed's pettiness to people who'd been neutral before. The town council had quietly distanced themselves from his more extreme positions. Then came the news that changed everything. Maylin was working in her studio when Lucas burst in, waving a telegram with an expression she'd never seen before. Shock mixed with something that looked like vindication. "Reed's been arrested." Maylin dropped the fabric she was holding. "What?" "Federal marshals. They've been investigating him for months, apparently. Fraud, embezzlement, using his position on the council to manipulate land deals." Lucas was reading from the telegram. They found evidence he'd been taking bribes, falsifying records, all sorts of things. The territorial government is launching a full investigation into his activities. How did they find out? Lucas's smile was grim. Someone tipped them off, sent them documentation of every illegal thing Reed's done for the past 5 years. Who? The telegram doesn't say, but whoever it was knew exactly where to look and what to provide. Lucas met her eyes. Morris thinks it might have been Judge Morrison. Apparently he's been keeping records, waiting for the right moment. Maylin sank into her chair, trying to process it. Thomas Reed, the man who'd tried to destroy her marriage and ruin Lucas's reputation, was facing federal charges. The man who'd weaponized the town council against anyone who didn't fit his vision of how Redemption Creek should operate was being revealed as a criminal himself. "What happens now?" she asked. "Trial, probably. And Reed loses everything, his position, his property, his influence, everything he tried to protect by attacking us." Lucas crouched beside her chair. "It's over, May. Really over this time." The relief that flooded through her was so intense it hurt. Not because she'd been waiting for revenge, but because the shadow that had hung over their marriage since the beginning was finally gone. "We won," she said, testing the words again. "We survived," Lucas corrected gently, "and we built something good while we were at it." That night, the ranch felt different. Lighter somehow, like a weight had lifted. Rosa hummed while she cooked dinner. Jack laughed easier. Even the ranch hands seemed more relaxed, as if Reed's arrest had freed everyone from a tension they'd been carrying. Maylin and Lucas ate dinner on the porch, watching the sun set over the valley. And for the first time since they'd married, neither of them mentioned investigations or town councils or social standing. "I was thinking," Lucas said, refilling her glass of wine, "about what comes next." "Next? We've spent months fighting to keep this marriage intact, but we've never really talked about what we want it to become." He looked at her seriously. "I know we started this as a practical arrangement, but these past months, getting to know you, building a life with you, it's become something more for me." Maylin's heart was doing something complicated in her chest. "More like what?" "More like I'm falling in love with you." Lucas said it simply, without drama or flourish. "I don't know when it happened exactly. Maybe it was watching you stand up to the council. Maybe it was seeing you build your business from nothing. Maybe it was just all the small moments in between." He took her hand. "But I look at you now, and I don't see my convenient wife or my partner in a practical arrangement. I see the person I want to spend my life with." Maylin felt tears prickling at her eyes. "Lucas, you don't have to say it back. I'm not asking you to feel the same way or to—" "I love you too." The words came out rushed, almost clumsy. "I think I have for a while now. I was just too scared to admit it. Too worried that if I let myself feel it, I'd lose it somehow." Lucas's expression transformed into something that made Maylin's breath catch. "Yeah? Yeah." She laughed through the tears that were falling now. "You're stubborn and terrible at talking about feelings, and you work too much. But you also see me, really see me. You've given me space to become someone I didn't know I could be. And you've stood beside me through everything without making it about saving me or controlling me. You've just Been there. Lucas pulled her into his arms, and Mei Lin let herself sink into it. This wasn't the desperate embrace of two people clinging to each other in a storm. This was the solid comfort of two people who'd weathered the storm together and come out stronger. So where does that leave us? Lucas asked against her hair. Building something real, Mei Lin said. Actually real, not just legally binding. I can work with that. They sat there as the sky darkened, holding each other and watching the stars emerge one by one. Somewhere in Redemption Creek, Thomas Reed was sitting in a cell facing the consequences of his actions. Somewhere in the territory, the investigation that had nearly destroyed their marriage was being filed away as resolved. Somewhere in the world, people were probably still judging them for marrying too fast under suspicious circumstances. But here, on this porch, in this home they'd built together, none of that mattered. The harvest ball came around again that fall. Mei Lin had been dreading it for weeks. The anniversary of the night everything changed, the reminder of how she'd been invisible until Lucas made her seen. But when the invitation arrived, addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Hartley in formal script, Lucas looked at it and then at her with a question in his eyes. Do you want to go? Mei Lin thought about it honestly. A year ago, she'd stood in a blue silk dress borrowed from Sarah, invisible to everyone except the man who'd written his name on every line of her dance card. So much had changed since then. She'd built a business, survived an investigation, faced down her enemies and won. She'd transformed from a seamstress living in a rented room to the wife of one of the territory's most successful ranchers and an accomplished dressmaker in her own right. But more than that, she'd found herself. Not the version of herself she'd created to survive, small and invisible and apologetic for existing, but the version who'd been there all along, buried under years of just trying to make it through another day. Yes, she said, I want to go. This time, she didn't borrow a dress. She made one herself, deep emerald silk that brought out the color of her eyes, cut in the latest fashion but with subtle nods to her heritage in the embroidery and detailing. When she put it on the night of the ball, Lucas stopped in the hallway and stared. What? Mei Lin asked, suddenly self-conscious. You're beautiful. He said it like it was a revelation, even though he'd seen her every day for months. I mean, you're always beautiful, but tonight you're… He stopped, searching for words. Visible? Mei Lin supplied, smiling. Radiant. Lucas offered his arm. Ready to scandalize the town again? I think we've done enough scandalizing. Let's just dance. The ballroom looked the same as it had a year ago. Same paper lanterns, same band, same people trying very hard to have a good time. But the atmosphere when Mei Lin walked in with Lucas was completely different. Last year, they'd been met with shocked stares and hostile whispers. This year, people actually approached them. Mrs. Pemberton introduced Mei Lin to her cousin from Denver, who'd been dying to meet the dressmaker everyone was talking about. Judge Morrison made a point of shaking Lucas's hand and congratulating them both on their marriage. Even some of Reed's former allies offered cautious greetings, clearly trying to distance themselves from their fallen leader. Sarah grabbed Mei Lin in a fierce hug the moment she spotted her. Look at you. Look at this dress. You're stunning. It's just fabric and thread. It's more than that, and you know it. Sarah stepped back, her eyes shining. A year ago, you were invisible. Now you're the most talked about woman in 3 territories. How does it feel? Mei Lin looked around the ballroom, at the women eyeing her dress with a mix of envy and admiration, at the men treating Lucas with renewed respect now that Reed's smear campaign had been exposed as the vindictive lies they were, at the space she and Lucas occupied in this room, no longer shocking or scandalous, but simply present. It feels like I finally exist, she said. The band started playing a waltz. Lucas appeared at her elbow, offering his hand just like he had a year ago. But everything about this moment was different. May I have this dance, Mrs. Hartley? All of them, if you'd like. Lucas smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. They moved on to the dance floor, and this time Lucas didn't stumble or apologize. They'd spent months learning each other's rhythms, and how they moved through their days, and how they communicated, and how they navigated the world together. Dancing was just another extension of that partnership. Around them, other couples filled the floor. Mei Lin caught glimpses of familiar faces. Sarah and James dancing nearby. Mrs. Fletcher watching with approval as her newly married daughter danced in the dress Mei Lin had made. Even Albert Monroe looking resigned to his continued bachelorhood. What are you thinking about? Lucas asked. about how much has changed, about how scared I was a year ago, and how different everything is now. Are you happy? Lucas's voice was quiet, meant only for her. Maylin thought about it. Happiness felt like such a simple word for the complicated mix of emotions she carried. Relief at having survived, pride in what she'd built, love for the man who'd chosen to stand beside her, satisfaction at proving everyone wrong about who she could be. But underneath all that complexity was something pure and simple and undeniable. Yes, she said, I'm happy. Good. Lucas pulled her slightly closer, breaking propriety in a way that was becoming their signature. Because I intend to keep you that way. They danced until the music ended, then danced again to the next song and the one after that. By the time the evening was halfway through, Maylin's feet ached and her face hurt from smiling, but she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this light. When they finally took a break for refreshments, they found themselves surrounded by well-wishers. People who'd shunned them months ago now wanted to congratulate them, to be seen in their orbit, to pretend they'd supported the marriage all along. It was hypocritical and obvious, and Maylin accepted it anyway, because she'd learned something important in the past year. You didn't need everyone's approval to build a good life. You just needed your own conviction and the people who mattered standing beside you. Later, standing outside to cool off in the autumn air, Maylin and Lucas found themselves alone for the first time all evening. This is different from last year, Lucas observed. Everything's different from last year. Do you miss it? The simplicity of it, I mean. Back when it was just us against the world and nothing else mattered? Maylin considered the question honestly. There had been something clarifying about that early period, when their marriage was under attack and they had to choose each other over and over just to survive. But it had also been exhausting, living in constant crisis mode. I don't miss the fighting, she said, but I'm grateful for what it taught us. About each other. About ourselves. What did it teach you? That I'm stronger than I thought, that I don't have to make myself small to deserve space in the world, that choosing myself isn't selfish, it's necessary. She looked at Lucas. What did it teach you? Lucas was quiet for a moment, looking out at the town spread below them. That letting people in is scary, but worth it. That Catherine's death didn't mean I had to stop living. That loving someone doesn't mean losing myself. It means finding parts of myself I didn't know existed. He turned to her. And that sometimes the best things come from the choices that terrify us most. Maylin felt her throat tighten with emotion. I'm glad you chose to be terrified with me. Best decision I ever made. Lucas kissed her, slow and sweet, not caring who might see. Even when it was a disaster. Especially when it was a disaster, Maylin corrected, smiling against his lips. They went back inside to finish the evening, dancing until the last song played and the lanterns were being taken down. As they rode home through the quiet darkness, Maylin felt a sense of completion she'd never experienced before. A year ago, she'd been a seamstress no one noticed, invited to a ball she didn't expect to enjoy. Now she was Maylin Hartley, business owner, survivor, wife, woman who'd rewritten every story people tried to force her into. The journey hadn't been smooth or easy or anything close to a fairy tale. It had been messy and painful and uncertain. She'd been terrified more often than brave. She'd doubted herself and her choices and whether any of it would work out. But she'd kept going anyway, kept choosing courage over comfort, visibility over safety, herself over the easier path. And she'd won, not because everything was perfect now. The town would always have people who disapproved of her marriage. Her business would face challenges. Life would throw new obstacles at them that they couldn't anticipate. But she'd proven something essential. That she had the strength to face those challenges, that her worth wasn't determined by other people's acceptance, that she could build a life on her own terms and defend it against anyone who tried to tear it down. When they reached the ranch, Lucas helped her down from the horse, and they stood for a moment in the yard looking up at the house that had become their home. What are you thinking about? Lucas asked. About beginnings, Maylin said, about how the worst moments sometimes lead to the best things. About how we started this marriage as strangers, making a desperate choice, and turned it into something real. No regrets? About marrying you. Not one. She squeezed his hand. About everything we went through to get here? I wish it had been easier, but I don't regret surviving it. Lucas pulled her close. I love you, Maylin Hartley. I love you too. She said it easily now, without the fear that had haunted her for so long. even when you're stubborn and impossible and work too much. Especially then, Lucas said, echoing her earlier words and making her laugh. They walked into the house together, into the life they'd fought for and built, and claimed despite everyone who'd tried to stop them. Rosa had left the lamps burning in welcome. The workroom door stood open, showing the dress Mei Lin was working on for her next client. Lucas's study was organized chaos, papers and ledgers marking all the business he'd rebuilt after Reed's attacks. It was imperfect and real and entirely theirs. Months later, as winter settled over the valley and Mei Lin's business continued to grow, she found herself thinking about the path that had brought her here. About the girl who'd arrived in Redemption Creek with nothing but a needle and thread and determination. About the woman who'd survived 6 years of invisibility only to be thrust into visibility in the most painful way possible. About the choice to say yes when Lucas Hartley wrote his name on her dance card. About every choice after that, to marry him, to fight the investigation, to build her business, to claim space in a world that didn't want her there. She'd learned something profound through it all, that worth wasn't bestowed by others. It wasn't earned through suffering or proved through perfect behavior. It simply existed, inherent and undeniable, in every person who had the courage to claim it. Thomas Reed had tried to make her doubt that worth, had tried to convince her that she was only valuable in relation to the men who controlled her future, that her choices didn't matter if they went against what powerful people wanted. He'd been wrong. Every person who'd dismissed her, ignored her, tried to erase her, they'd all been wrong. Because Mei Lin was still here, still standing, still building the life she'd chosen despite every obstacle thrown in her path. That was the story she wanted to tell. Not about a poor seamstress saved by a wealthy rancher, but about a woman who saved herself, who recognized that marriage could be partnership instead of ownership, who took the hand offered to her not because she needed rescuing, but because she chose to build something together with someone who saw her worth. Lucas found her in the workroom one snowy afternoon, staring out the window at the valley covered in white. "Penny for your thoughts?" "I was thinking about stories," Mei Lin said. "About how people will tell this one. Our story. What will they say? Probably that you married beneath you, that I was lucky to catch such a good husband, that it was scandalous but worked out in the end." She turned to look at him. "They'll make it about luck or scandal or you choosing me. They won't understand that I chose you just as much, that this was always a partnership." Lucas came to stand beside her. "Does it matter what they say?" "It matters that I know the truth." Mei Lin leaned into him. "That we both do. That this marriage isn't some fairy tale about a prince saving a pauper. It's about two people who are both broken in different ways, finding each other and choosing to heal together." "I like that version better anyway," Lucas said. Outside, snow continued to fall on the valley that had witnessed their entire journey. From that first dance to the investigation to the slow building of trust and love that followed. The land didn't judge. It just existed, constant and solid, while human drama played out across its surface. Mei Lin thought about all the women who'd come before her, who'd made impossible choices in impossible circumstances. Her mother, who taught her to sew and died too young. Catherine Hartley, who tried to find happiness in a place that didn't suit her. Sarah, who'd chosen to stand beside her friend when it would have been easier to look away. All of them navigating a world that tried to tell them who they should be and what they should want. All of them finding ways to claim their own worth anyway. That was the real story. Not about one extraordinary woman, but about the ordinary courage it took to insist on your own humanity when the world tried to deny it. Mei Lin had learned that courage, had practiced it every day until it became second nature. And now she stood in a workroom in a house she owned, married to a man who loved her, building a business that bore her name, finally and irrevocably visible. She'd fought for every inch of this life, and she'd keep fighting for it for as long as it took, because she'd learned the most important lesson of all, that strength wasn't about never being afraid or never doubting yourself. It was about feeling the fear and doubt and choosing to move forward anyway. About believing you deserved space in the world and claiming it, one choice at a time. From a forgotten outsider to a woman who'd reshaped her own destiny, Mei Lin had proven that courage and self-worth could rewrite even the harshest story. And this was just the beginning of what she could build. The snow fell softly on the valley, covering everything in white, and inside the ranch house, Mei Lin Hartley stood at her workroom window beside her husband, looking out at a future that was finally, truly hers to shape. She'd come to Redemption Creek with nothing and been given less. She'd survived by making herself invisible, by working twice as hard for half the recognition, by never demanding more than the bare minimum required to exist. But existence wasn't living, and Mei Lin had learned to live. Not perfectly, not without scars or doubts or moments of fear, but fully, authentically, as herself rather than as the person others wanted her to be. That was the victory Thomas Reed could never take from her. That was the truth no investigation could invalidate. That was the story she'd tell her children someday, if she and Lucas were blessed with them. Not a story about being saved, but about saving yourself. About recognizing your own worth when no one else would. About building a life on your own terms and defending it fiercely. 7 Dances had changed her life. But it was the choices she'd made in every moment after, to fight, to build, to love, to claim space, to refuse to disappear, that had truly transformed her. And as Lucas pulled her close and pressed a kiss to her temple, as the valley lay peaceful under its blanket of snow, as her half-finished dress waited on the work table for tomorrow's attention, Mei Lin felt something she'd never truly felt before. Home, not the building, not the land, but the sense of finally belonging in her own life, of having earned her place not through suffering or luck, but through the deliberate daily choice to be more than the world expected. That was the real ending to her story, and the beginning of everything that came next.